Welcome to a full council meeting of the Queenstown Lakes District Council, Tuesday, 8th of March, 2025. Do you have any apologies noting Councillor Tucker is on leave or approved leave of absence? So no apologies. Any leave of absence requests?
22nd of September to the 6th of October. 22nd of September to the 6th of October.
Barry?
21st of April to the 9th of May.
Oh, and I have one from the 23rd of April to the 11th of May. I hope I do not see you, Barry, while I'm on holiday.
No.
Okay.
It's probably the same thing.
I move that the requests for leaves of absence be approved. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Evan. All those in favour?
Aye.
Motion carried. Declarations of conflict of interest.
I declare a conflict on the user fees.
Okay. Yeah.
And I'm happy to take guidance if you want me to step away from the table or just.
I think we're just going up for consultation. I don't think it's needed. Matters lying on the table. There are no matters lying on the table. Special announcements. Just like to acknowledge the passing of former councillor John McDonald a week ago. I know that he was a big contributor to the community, mainly through his work with the Forerunner to Destination Queenstown, and chair with DQ, his love of rallying, Jesus, and obviously in his later years, post his council work as a councillor, his work on the hub, or the community hub, which is still progressing. And on a personal note, I think, as I look around the table, I think it's just yourself, Nikki, and I with the cohort of councillors.
And me.
And Phil. No, when we first came on.
Correct.
And from a personal note, I found John to be one of those guiding lights when he first came on to council. He took a lot of advice from him, and he had a fair bit of respect around the table. So it's just an acknowledgement of John McDonald. All right, moving on. Public forum. Got 5 speakers. First up, yeah.
It was great at the last meeting to congratulate you for the vision of a fully electrified region. Unfortunately, after another abnormally warm month, it is becoming increasingly more urgent to make these changes materialize. A recently released risk assessment report from the British Association of Actuaries shows how underestimated climate risks have been so far. As risk assessment professionals, they estimate that without immediate and meaningful action, we are likely to pass 2 degrees of warming by 2050, which would cause a 25% drop in global GDP and more than 2 billion deaths. And this isn't a statement from a tree hugger, but from professionals trusted by insurers to run the business. Another interesting report has just been released by the World Economic Forum. It is a risk perception report. Insights on the evolving global risks landscape have been collected from thousands of experts and leaders around the world. The results are telling. If today the main concerns are in order: armed conflicts, extreme weather events, geo-economic confrontation, and misinformation, in 10 years only, the top 4 concerns are all environmental: extreme weather events, biodiversity loss and ecosystem collapse, critical changes to Earth systems, and natural resources shortage. Anyone in a position of power across the world knows what is coming, and yet nothing meaningful is happening. The problem is that these people, who are all well aware of our environmental situation, think that by just tweaking the system a bit, they'll get others to fix the problem for them. This is not how it works. We all need to stop burning stuff, and we all need to change some of our life choices, or nothing will happen. Now, this report also highlights some solutions. One of them being to urgently reduce the amount of black carbon or soot we generate. On top of being highly toxic and the cause of many diseases, it is an incredibly potent greenhouse gas. Addressing black carbon emissions has the potential to slow the rate of warming of the climate by up to 50%. The amount of air pollution and soot in the region is on the rise because of all the wood we burn in winter. You have consenting powers over the installation of log burners. Solid fuel burning is already regarded as a non-compliant activity in many areas of the district, and this should be generalized to the whole district. On the positive side, this is exactly what electrification enables. Electrification enables us to go on with our lives and to stay warm in winter for cheaper and without creating toxic air pollution and soot. Like these global leaders consulted by the World Economic Forum, we all know what needs to be done and we have all the solutions. The only question is, will we make it happen? We hope you will. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
Next up, Sam.
Thank you for the privilege of allowing me to speak to you today about an overlooked gem in the Lakes region, Gibston Valley. I say overlooked because for some it is the only stretch of 100-kilometer-per-hour highway straight road between Crown Range Turnoff and Cromwell Flats. In the past, it was just brown grass and rabbits, and the main activities were rabbit shooting and clearing with a match. That was the case when we bought our farm, Stronsay Farm, 29 years ago. It's changed. We all know that Gibston Valley is the home of commercial bungee jumping pioneered on the Kowarau Suspension Bridge by A.J. Hackett and Henry Van Ash. You also know that we have award-winning wines. Had a burned-out Irish journalist, Alan Brady, not planted vines in 1982 against all better advice, there would be no Central Otago wine industry. It would still be pit fruit and cherries. Gibston now has world-renowned vineyards, Sam Neill's 2 paddocks, Mark Dunphy's coal pit, Sir Murray Brennan's Brennan wines, and most of all, my next-door neighbor, Grant Taylor's Valley, which has more gold medals in London than any competing Pinot Noirs, including those of the Rothschild family. But Gibston Valley is about more than vineyards and bungee jumping. It's about more than low-impact tourism, rafting and kayaking on the Kowarau, bike tours, canyoning in Camp Creek, hiking up Ben Croacan, coal pit saddle, Mount Rose, and Mount Edward. It's about more than 9 full-time tasting rooms that service hikers and bikers and helicopters. For centuries, Naitahu used Gibston for passage to the West Coast Ponamu. The land is productive. Gibston Valley was designated HPL 3, highly productive land classification 3, on a scale of 1 to 10, to avoid rezoning and inappropriate use. The designation is intended to protect the pig-burn soils that produce the grapes, the horticulture, berries, and market gardens. And lest I forget, Gibston received last year, courtesy of the incredible work of astrophysicist Dr. Brian Boyle, Global Dark Sky status. This is a very complex process with Dark Sky International that only Dr. Boyle, a Gibston resident, could have negotiated. Point, Gibston's Dark Sky Park is the closest to any international airport, just 20 minutes, of any place on the planet. Why? Because the ridges of the valley block the lights of Queenstown. We are beginning to see the benefits of dark sky tourism less than a year after designation. But there's more to Gibston. It's about an intangible and an unquantifiable open space. As Wine Spectator says in its guide, quote, the vineyards sit high above the Kowarau River in a spectacular gorge, enjoying the benefits of sunshine and high altitude and world-class scenery, unquote. We can't define open space or ONLs and ONFs, but we know it when we see it. It has monetary value. We just don't value it yet. As one of the many visitors said, you've got to preserve this place. Places like this are disappearing fast. It's like a lung for Queenstown. In conclusion, thank you for listening. Thank you for preserving Gibston in your long-term plan. Please, as you go forward, consider and value the uniqueness of Gibston Valley, so close to Queenstown. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Una. Minutes in your own time, now. Away we go.
Thank you. I'm sitting here this morning or this afternoon as a resident but I can't deny that I own a holiday park. I am also a landlord to residents around the holiday park. I'm very concerned that our district is becoming a hot topic for all the wrong reasons. I have a reasonable understanding of the issues, and the unintended consequences are unacceptable. And this is not my first time at this table for this topic. The Freedom Camping Act regulates the land within 200 metres of an area accessible by a motor vehicle, or within 200 metres of the mean low water spring line of any sea or harbour, or on or within 200 metres of a formed road, quote unquote. It is all about the land, not the roads. The roads are essential services. However, we have roads all over the district with vehicles outside homes night after night. Slowly but surely, the streets and the lake edges are becoming toilets and rubbish pits. Small camper vans, registered self-contained or not, parked on roads, not land. Strangers are parked on the road outside a home overnight, urinating into the bushes and gardens we all attend to, cleaning their teeth on the gutters, blocking the footpaths, hanging their washing out. It is well known that the toilet in most vans, the small vans, are not used, or in fact are removed once the warrant is approved. This is not freedom camping, it's free camping. Many of these campers have turned into thieves since Christmas. The reality is many of these occupants are in fact employees in town, including with QLDC. Do their employers know that they are employing thieves? Table 2 in your page 92 in your agenda is somewhat misleading as it only covers infringements issued. The reality for the residents in any given street is much more. Park Street, upwards of 40 vans parking across from the residents. Prior Street, 8 to 10 every night. I'm going to table a report from my manager at Creekside of the contacts made to the council this year, done when she had time from her proper duties. Trespass notices have been issued and additional security cameras and signage added. Education is a great idea, but these campers are turning over more often than many of our employees. I believe that we need a peer review done by the MPDG, the Plumbing Association, on the way that warranting inspections are being carried out. Freedom camping is well and truly tourism's duty-dairy event countrywide. I will just leave these to be passed around to.
Rena?
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Anna.
Thank you. I expect to be back.
Rob?
Afternoon, and thank you for your time. I wear two hats today, one as a resident of Park Street, the second as a business owner in Hamilton Road. For 45 odd years, we have owned and operated businesses here. I haven't seen the state or the level of abuse that we're getting as we're currently getting at the moment. Firstly, Pinewood Lodge takes 400, 500 people a night. It's busy. It's a big operation. Daily, nightly, and this is all times of the night, we are getting camper van people who are camping on the street, coming into Pinewood, taking showers, going into communal kitchens, pinching stuff out of communal kitchens. We have got them coming to reception, wanting to use Wi-Fi and getting codes so they can use Wi-Fi, even to the point on rubbish day, multiple bins go out. By the time the staff go to collect them, bins are half full, some of them overflowing with rubbish out of camper vans. It's inexcusable. We've had enough. Secondly, We live on Park Street. Right next door to Ivy Box, if you know where the Ivy Box is. Daily, I take our dog out for a walk. Multiple times, I've had to bring the dog back. It's covered in excreta. It's gone, run on the beach, come back and roll in it. If anybody wants that job, please let me know. It's disgusting. Regularly, I will count between 30 and 40 plus camper vans between our place and the gardens. These vehicles, many of them, I counted 9 vehicles only just a day or so ago, which weren't registered. A number of them don't have warrant witnesses. Most of them don't display the camping signs in the back of these vehicles. These people are cunning. They use the internet, they talk to one another, they know where to go. These signs that they put on the back of the vans, wasted time. You can buy them online. Have a look, troll them, find them online. Even to the point, some of the vans which go to get these tickets and they have to put toilet seats in, they put them on top of a can, get their ticket, and then they sell things online. This is what we're dealing with. Often we have seen people washing in the lake, you're getting soap out, bathing up there. You know what's happening in the bushes. It's simply not on. The days of calling Queenstown pure and being able to trade on this clean green image, I'm sorry, have well gone. When we can't control what's happening in this town, who can? Over to you guys. I do have some suggestions to make and how you could deal with some of this stuff, but I don't have time.
Thank you, Rob.
Thank you.
Connor.
Afternoon, councillors, mayor, thank you for your time. I'll be addressing the agenda on 6 Marionette Street. A brief history on that property. It was purchased from Eamon Cleary through the late John Martin, and funding came from the Aratown Endowment Fund, a fund specifically for use of reserves in Aratown, and some loan funding. David Clark chaired the Aratown Colleges Trust that workshopped ideas for the future use of the buildings and land that became the college's precinct. Offices in the cottages and an anchor tenant in Provisions Cafe. The concept for 6 Marionette was to ultimately make this an art precinct with possible rentable studios. Council tried to sell this in the past and were reminded it was purchased with community money via endowment fund and also charitable trust money. If so, the money should go back to an Aratown project, not QLDC pot. Many volunteers worked for years to see this vision. A little bit about me. An honours degree in sculpture. I've been living here for 22 years. I was a member at the Stanley Street Art Society building, which I was politely asked to leave on account of the dust I produced, which wasn't compatible with painters and the like. Went on the search for another studio, which I found at the now Amory Chin Architect's office, which was earmarked for a petrol station. I was then approached to lease number 6 Marionette to continue my endeavours. So I've leased it for 15 years. It's become the home for my son and I, along with my studio below. I'd like to add that the previous tenants were doing some questionable activity, which the police were aware of. I'll leave it at that. I've liaised with both David and Phil Blakely on the usage planting, sympathetic improvements, i.e. a dry stone wall, which I installed at the front of the property on Marionette Street. Planting, which created hedging then Roman Lane, and the sculptures I've made in the garden open to all for everyone to enjoy. Improvements were also made internally at my own cost, all at my own cost, by the way. Usage at the moment is residential and sculpture, allowing for 2 artists to work from the studio. I've got a stonemason business, and I've done many projects in Aratown, and I'm very much behind the spirit of cultural heritage in the village, and I'm passionate about our village. I'm requesting, if indeed you vote to divest 6 Marionette, I would like first right of refusal for the property. I would continue to work alongside the Aratown Planning and Design Board, whilst continuing to keep art for all to enjoy on site. It would be fair to get 3 registered valuations for the property to arrive at a fair and equitable price for all. In contrast, the developer may end up commercialising this part of the village unsympathetically to the cultural significance it currently offers. That's all. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Okay. I move that the agenda be confirmed without addition or alteration. Seconder. Thank you, Mel. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Confirmation of minutes from the ordinary meeting of the council held on 13th of February 2025. I move that they are true and correct record. Seconder. There are, sorry,
There were some amendments, I think.
there were some amendments, sorry, for the minutes.
I emailed them through to Jane.
Sorry, I
Sorry.
better go through this. So,
Through the chair, those amendments have been made.
that's page 5 of the minutes. Sorry, I jumped ahead, councillors, apologies. So it's just recording councillor Cox and councillor Tucker to be recorded as voting against the submission on the treaty bill, with councillor Long abstaining. And the resolution on the submission to the infrastructure commission, part 3 of the resolution was carried unanimously. So those were the amendments. So it's moved. Second from Lyle. All those in favour?
Aye.
Motion carried. Go to the second. Okay, item 1.
No, there's another minute.
Second
Second
set
one.
of minutes.
The second set, of course. Right, there is a correction in the second lot of minutes for 25th of February. In the papers that you have, we're changing, it's getting amended where the motion for suspended of standing order 2022, the outcome of the vote was put and failed 3-9, not, I think, in the more original papers, is a tie. Yeah. Okay. So I move that the minutes of the ordinary meeting of the Queenstown Lakes District Council held on the 25th of February as amended be confirmed as a true correct record. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Esther. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried. Right. Now we're on to item 1. User fees and charges. Take it away.
Thank you, Chair. Assume that's taken as read. Just a reminder that the revenue and financing policy is kind of the guiding document in relation to fees and charges. It sets out how much should be paid by users versus how much should be paid by rates. And staff have reviewed the cost of their services and have looked at all the fees and charges to ensure that we're recovering what it says in the revenue and financing policy. And so by that, we are benefiting the ratepayers by having a reduced rates from what we would have had. I guess the next step today is if you adopt this fees and charges statement of proposal, with that we go to consultation, and that will be starting tomorrow. The other part of the paper is around the development contributions policy, which is just adding the indexation that we're able to do. And the fourth recommendation is just looking for a panel to hear those submissions and make a recommendation back to council.
Questions, councillors?
Thanks.
There you go.
Look, obviously we're just agreeing this to go out for consultation, but I'm just concerned still, and I've mentioned this in workshops, just about the statement. There's one on page 3 that says, as part of the LTP, it was agreed that user fees and charges would be adjusted each year based on inflation, CPI plus rounding. And sorry, I need to go on the revenue and financing policy. Sorry, 2 secs. So in the revenue and financing policy, under user fees and charges, or under fees and charges, it says there's a wide range of revenue under this general title. Generally, the council will look to use fees and charges to recover the private benefit costs of a particular activity. it's economically viable to do so. And we obviously have charts that set out what's the private percentage and what's the public percentage, and we're supposed to meet that because that's our policy. And in the LTP, it also says under other sources of income, council will also complete an annual user fees pricing review for consumer price index CPI adjustments and any other appropriate benchmarks. The way I took that was that we do a review to see how it stands against CPI, but the way we charge is in line with actual anticipated costs and then percentage. What's the, private percentage, what's the user percentage, and we charge as a percentage of the actual anticipated costs. But that's not what we're doing now, so it's a change. Sorry, this is a question. I know you were about to ask, sorry, I just realised. So look, I guess for a start, what are your thoughts on that? And more specifically, why don't we have that chart in front of us that shows that we're complying with policy that says, yes, this is the percentage? Could you explain that?
I certainly can provide you with that table. It's just quite a lot of numbers, and so staff have looked at all what our costs are versus what percentage we're trying to achieve, and that's why those rates have been increased.
So what happens when that amount is different to CPI? For example, say if we are doing this and our operational costs.
Just answer that question. What happens if they're different from CPI?
So we have got some that are not aligned with CPI, I guess, is that we're saying there's 5 that we've got: planning and development, sport and rec. So for example, planning and development, we are sitting at 77.8% for resource consents versus an 80% target. So we're not quite, it's on the journey to achieving the 80%. So we're not quite there yet.
I'm just trying to understand the approach over time. So over time, as CPI increases, we'll increase the user fees according to CPI specifically. At some point, that's going to get out of whack potentially for any number of these with the actual policy in terms of the percentage that is supposed to be charged and the actual cost. What is the process? Are we doing a different kind of review every 3 years? Because over time we are going to change levels of service, and the OPEX costs of certain things will change. They might go up, they might go down if we're more efficient. If we're constantly going up just in line with CPI, we're not going to be in line with the policy. That's my concern. So I just want to understand how you're going to readjust back to the policy when CPI doesn't allow us to comply with the policy.
So I guess the CPI is being used in between LTPs. So when we do the LTP again, we'll do another deep dive into fees and charges, and we'll again go through the revenue and financing policy and make sure that we're still trying to hit the right targets.
Okay. So that will happen
That will happen again.
And just for clarity, does this allow you to save a lot of time and effort? Is this a staff resourcing benefit using CPI, or is it about collecting more revenue?
Well, it's in line with what we proposed in the LTP, which was to keep in line with the revenue and financing policy. So all our costs have increased. And so this is a mechanism to cover those increases.
It was also, you might recall the conversation about it being a tool for incremental increase as opposed to having those shock increases. So annually we can bring it up. It's a means to just continue to incrementally increase as opposed to those bigger.
I understand. I just wonder if we are technically not complying with our policy and it's a total shift away from what we used to do, and just making sure that we don't overcharge or undercharge.
Further question?
That'll do.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. Any further? Devin?
Just quick clarification. So the table on page 24 that has the rating impact, that, just to confirm, that is what the rating impact would be if we want to try and achieve the same amount of income without increasing the fees and charges.
Yeah, so if, for example, you didn't do the parking fee increase, then you'd have to put 0.364% back onto your rates.
Yeah. And some of those, and it's said elsewhere in the document, is adds up to about 1.6% overall, just a bit over that. So yeah, so to achieve the same level of overall revenue, without these, it would be equivalent to a 1.6% extra increase in rates.
So it's 2.4 million in total.
Yep.
Yeah, so it's 1.5%, equals 1%, so you're just under.
And then my other question was just around the three options that are given. Option one is to adopt, option three is to not adopt the statement of proposal. Option two is sort of not really, it talks about adopting some of the fees and charges, which obviously that's a decision for later in the piece after the consultation anyway. Would that, if there was to be an option two, consider that would be more along the lines of adopting proposal but with some amendments to it.
It's just giving you the option to not necessarily today adopt all of them for consultation. So you could actually say, actually, we don't want to progress this one or that one. So that's what option two is about.
That's fine, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Two things. So just to be clear that we're only noting an update to the development contributions policy, we're not consulting on that.
That's correct.
And secondly, through the regional deal preparation, and we had a report to the infrastructure committee about a policy review of the travel belt management, for instance, that both those highlighted a shortfall in growth related cost recovery from development contribution, or the potential for, and I suppose so just, is there an opportunity to review the development contributions policy, and how will we go about that over time, not necessarily before this?
Well, I mean, first of all, the LTP is the opportune time for us to, because it's built up of growth projects, so we need to have that full list of projects and looking out 10 years. And so that's the first opportunity, is to update it. There's also obviously changes in legislation that is being consulted on at the moment, which again might change how we do it.
That's the development levy bill that potentially would change the equation, but I suppose, yeah, and I understand both those points, just signalling that there's obviously a body of work that needs to come along with that, and that we need to understand better our ability to recover costs for development, for growth related costs, and we need to be looking forward on that, but thank you for the answers.
The only comment I'd make is, as you've already pointed out, is the review that's been undertaken by the DIA and MV and MHUB. And you know, that may lead to some opportunities for us. I mean, our initial look at that suggests that it's not going to actually benefit us particularly much at all as a council, but we are continuing to interrogate those working papers. All right. Any questions? No? Do I have a mover? Sure. I'll thank Devon. Second, thank you, Barry. Open to discussion.
I just look on that point. I just want to go back to the point I raised before, where it states in the sorry, I'm speaking to the councillors, where it states that in the consultation document that as part of the LTP, it was agreed that user fees and charges would be adjusted each year based on inflation, CPI plus rounding. I just simply disagree with that statement. Looking at the revenue and financing policy, I agree that there would be a review against benchmarks, including CPI, but our policy says that our fees will be charged in line with obviously anticipated budgeted costs and the stated percentage of that being charged to user fees. It seems like a small thing, but it's a, you know, it's a clear statement in there that we said we would do this, and I don't believe we did. I don't believe we clearly consulted on that. I don't recall it through the LTP process, and it's not to me what our revenue and financing policy says. If we could remove it, I would be happy with agreeing it, but I'm just interested to hear from other councillors on that point. I'm assuming that there's not a lot of support for it, so they'll just let it lie and maybe vote against. But I just think that document should be accurate. And to me, that's not accurate.
Good discussion, councillors.
So just to cancel the last. I will support these fees and charges, obviously provide for the payment of these services or a portion of them in line with the policy that we have for partial partial payment by the user and partially by spread across the general rate population. And they make these services affordable to the user and fair to the community. And they also, the annual review also corrects the situation we've had in the past where it seemed that fees weren't reviewed regularly and remained artificially low, and then had to increase in big jumps to catch up. So supporting this going to consultation, and we'll see what comments we get back.
Thank you, Gavin. And with that, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye. Against? Thank you.
And I didn't vote.
You didn't vote, you abstained? Okay, thank you.
No, she stepped aside, she was.
Oh, okay, right. Thank you. Item 2, page 29, Easter trading. Michelle. Who's leading this one? There you go, Gary.
So this is the policy. It looks a bit like a bylaw because it requires councillors to consult using a special consultative procedure. The other thing that's different about it is it's regulated by MB, not by QLDC. The only other things to note, if council elects to adopt a policy, it will effectively be a continuation of the 2017 policy. There's no substantial changes in there proposed. And the report in front of you outlines that the focus of the hearing panel discussion was on ensuring that the policy doesn't disadvantage employees. So, I think that's council to discuss.
The disadvantage side.
Sorry, the disadvantage employees that,
Okay, thank you. Questions, councillors? Lisa, and then I'll go to Quentin.
Thank you, through the chair. So the panel have recommended that there be a notice to the community outlined on an annual basis. What would that look like? What does that mean?
through you, Chair, how that's implemented would be determined by the communications team in due course. I personally don't have anything either to add to it. Other than that.
My question, do we give any consideration to the difference between a public holiday and a statutory holiday in ways that we approach?
Through you, Chair, my understanding is that that's not how this Act identifies it. It uses restricted day versus prohibited. It's just a different language. So for example, for this 4-day period over Easter, Saturday is not a restricted day. Sunday is, so we need to have this policy. Monday, not a restricted day. So it's just not the language used in the Act.
So the distinction between public holiday and a statutory holiday, my question's around, my understanding is that with a statutory holiday, which Easter Sunday isn't, right? Easter Sunday is a public holiday, but not a statutory holiday, where Good Friday and Easter Monday are statutory holidays. So where I'm coming from with this is that a statutory holiday, a business is not legally required to close, right? So this is covered by the shop trading. We're looking at the shop trading legislation, but other businesses, Beaker, Veolia, whoever, don't have legal restrictions around their trading on that day. I'm trying to understand why we're communicating beyond the scope of our areas of control when the legislation around the Employment Contract Act, the Holidays Act, all of these things already offers protection to employees as to when and where they can't, when they can't work. And in fact, all our public holidays in New Zealand have to be treated under every individual's employment contract. I'm just querying why we're going out and communicating on stuff that is covered very clearly in all sorts of legislation already. And I know that it's not a big issue. My concern is that we just keep adding little bits of work to our team to one, remember, to respond to, and I'm not even sure what that would look like as a public notice. Is that in the paper? Is it cost? Like, what are we going to do around communicating things that are already covered in the legislation. Why do we have to do this? Why do we have to do this? Sorry, why do we have to communicate stuff that is very clearly explained in New Zealand and Queensland?
My very short answer, I mean, I'm not going to speak to all of those points, is that, but for the council having a policy that permits shops to be open, the shops would be closed. So by virtue of the council, if it chooses to adopt this policy, having the policy in place, there are responsibilities, obligations that speak directly to just Easter Sunday. So put aside statutory public holidays. There are provisions in the Act that speak to, if a council has this policy, then this.
Yeah.
So I'm going to stop there.
Okay, so that is why.
Hang on. So that's sort of two things. So what you're saying, Carrie, is that it creates, by adopting the policy, it creates a specific obligation on council. And while that's not a statutory obligation to inform people specifically, by having the policy, I suppose what we heard back from the hearings panel was we should take the extra step and make that more aware to people. It's not, it's all correct, it's not a statutory requirement of the council to do so.
Okay, thank you. I've got two very quick questions. Many people will wonder why we're not applying this to Easter Friday as well. Can you explain why?
Through you, Chair, for, this Act is very special. For Queenstown, there is an exemption order in place for Good Friday. It's linked in the report. And so it's quite anachronistic. It actually says that its stores within a 35-kilometre radius of Camp Street and Ballarat Street may open on Good Friday. So stores outside of that radius may not open on Good Friday.
Including Monaco.
Correct. And so, as you may also be aware, there was a bill in Parliament that was unsuccessful at changing the law in this regard. So we, council does just have this structure to work under. So
And the Act only allows us to make an exemption for Sunday if we have a policy. It doesn't,
Correct.
it wouldn't allow us to make an exemption for Friday.
spot on.
For
There's
Monaco.
no room in that Act to make further exceptions.
I just wanted to make that clear because
Thank you.
I think it's, for the sake of clarity, I think we would have dealt with it holistically had we had the opportunity and we didn't.
So did you say 35K radius from Queenstown, Camp Street? And so that includes Ayrshire?
But not Kingston.
Well,
I'll just a quick clarification there also. I think if the Pembroke Mall's not included in the exemption of what it not.
Not the same days.
Huh?
sorry. Not easy.
So you just a very quick, and so this comes from the Shop Trading Hours Act, purely relates to shop employees. It doesn't cover any other types of businesses that aren't considered to be shops.
Through you, Chair, the Act does say what shops this is in relation to, and there are exclusions, you're right.
Thank you.
Okay. Further questions? Do I have a mover? Thank you, Matt. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Nikki. Discussion.
I'll just say something that, I think I mentioned when we first put this through to go to consultation, that I thought it was important to somehow notify people of their rights and responsibilities, and this is covered in here, so I'm quite pleased that is in there. Because I think, there is the potential that some of the employees who you might be asked to work in a shop on a Sunday, may be in a disadvantaged position, if it came to refusing to work, they didn't realise that they had that right to do that if the day was important to them to do other things. So thank you for having that in there.
And I suppose just to that point, I think we get to review this. I forget what the review period was going to be, but I think every 5 years, 3 years, every 3 years. So, there is the potential, if we noted that there were a lot of things weren't going well for employees as a result of our position, then that could be reviewed in 3 years' time as well. There was a lot of discussion on it around the panel. Yeah, and just on the word notice in point 4, we talked about education, and I'm not gonna, try and change the wording or anything, but I'm just interested in making sure that, you know, if we put a little notice in the paper that, and that's it, then the word may not get out, to Gavin's point, so it would be helpful if the comms team was minded to sort of communicate it via a more user-friendly channel. I don't know whether that's scuttlebutt or, sorry, it's not scuttlebutt anymore. It's just to make sure that people do see that point, because we've put it in there for a reason. We do want people to see it. Thank you.
Oh, no, sorry, I've got to go to Mick now. Ricky was the second.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, just from my perspective, I think to Lisa's point there, and I was sort of in that same boat at the start of our panel discussions around why do we have to sort of relitigate something that's already out there already in the public eye. But to Kerry's point, we are the organisation that's enabling trading on Easter Sunday. And even though that information around the employees' rights and the employers' obligations is out there, I think it was quite important to address one of the submitters. So there was 8 submissions, and one of them was against the policy because of the worker rights issues. So I think we've addressed that for that one submission, and that was a theme that came through in the last time that went to consultation as well. So no, I think this is an improvement on where it was, and yeah, you do get to review it 3 years down the track if you want to.
Thank you, Mick. And with that, put it to the vote.
One comment.
No? All those in favour? Aye. Against? None. Motion carried. Thank you. Item 3, navigation safety bylaw. Page 52, yep. That's it. The table's not big enough anymore. That's sort of emails. Oh, wow. See, or Luke, is you guys?
Kia ora, good afternoon, councillors. I'm Luke Place, I'm Principal Policy Advisor, and been working on navigation safety bylaw review with the team that is up here with me, so I'll just get them to introduce themselves quickly.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Isabella Logies, and I am the Monitoring Enforcement and Environmental Manager here at QLDC.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Craig Fahey, and I am the Waterways Regulatory Service.
So just a brief introduction from me. So the report in front of you provides information on the hearing panel's deliberations and the recommended amendments to the bylaw. It provides further advice from councillors, so the team up here on a number of the hearing panel's recommendations, and presents options to council to proceed with the bylaw. In particular, it's recommended that council adopt the draft bylaw. Just another few notes from me. The draft bylaw presented in attachment A just illustrates those recommendations that have been made by the panel, not those further bits of advice that are set out in the report by officers. And there's also one matter that we'd like to address that's come to our attention. There's some errors relating to the coordinates and the text of the bylaw due to the omission of a negative reference. Thank you for bringing that to our attention, Chair. And so despite that, the images that are shown in the back of the bylaw are correct. So all of the features that are represented by the coordinate text are correctly shown in the images in the back of the bylaw. And so we suggest that we introduce an additional resolution to authorise officers to make those minor corrections to those subject areas, and I understand that governance team have got that. That's it for me. Thank you.
There was also the question of removing to WGS 84, but I'll let the officers amend that one as well. Okay.
Maybe I'll just make an introduction of the panel.
I was the chair of the panel, and along with councillor Bartlett and councillor Cody Tucker, who's away today. I just wanted to thank the staff who did, I think, did an excellent job of this. All of them, I think we had, there's more out the back there too that were involved in this, the harbour master and others. They did a great job preparing it, great job participating in the process and informing the process and helping us with the deliberations, along with Cody and Gavin as well. We had excellent submissions and equally, I thought they were really productive submissions. There was a really good back and forth discussion around the issues that were brought to the table. And overall, this was sort of, in my view, was a matter of evolution, not revolution, is that the bylaw was working reasonably well and we made some changes to tidy a few things up. The ski lanes were contention, a bit about identification and communication and other things are all just minor changes. Subsequent to the hearing, there was a couple of bits of information that were clarified or made clear to us relating to ski lanes, and the panel are comfortable with the changes that the staff recommend following that. So we in effect accept those changes and they form part of the recommendation. There's one outstanding matter where the panel took a slightly different view to staff, that was relating to communication devices. So the panel's recommendation is as it's presented in the recommendation, in that we recommended that two communication devices were required for powered craft above 6 metres and not for small craft. And the reason the panel chose that, well, that direction was that things like wing foiling and windsurfing and kiteboarding and stuff have successfully done it without need for communication devices for a long time. And we're comfortable that that could continue. The staff took the view of the maritime position, which is mostly on the coast, and that recommend that all craft require some level of communication, and in effect that point still remains before the council today. You can choose either way, but the recommendation of the panel, and it might be useful if we put the resolutions up on the board, up on the screen, but yeah, that we recommend that the changes, with the exception of that last one, be adopted. So depending on who makes the motion, you'll either have option 5A or 5B, depending on which wording we choose.
So is it worth, Lou, if you could just run us through those three, so quite clear on the options before us?
Yeah, certainly. So I think, sorry, no, I think those are actually.
Yeah, that's fine.
Oh, okay, sorry.
It should say at the end of that second one, adopt the changes as recommended by.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Adopt the changes recommended by by officers.
Yeah. The email
Full stop. Yeah.
email you sent yesterday.
Yeah.
Yep. So the above one is the one that the panel recommended, and the lower one with the amendment, I think you can delete after officers. Is that what you're suggesting?
Well, it's just as recommended
By the officers.
Yeah. So it's making a distinction between who is recommending.
Okay.
Yeah, I was suggesting the
Yeah, it's
top red one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Questions, councillors?
So really, just to be clear, the only point of difference which councillor Smith's inviting comment on is the question of communication devices. All the other matters are agreed.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. The graphics that are shown in the new safety bylaw proposed for sign off today, are they the actual ones that, are they correct as of what you know? Because I'm looking at Sunshine Bay Ski Lane, and that's page 43 of the attachment A1, Green Governance.
What, can you just describe what, sorry, what the title of the map is?
Map 4E Sunshine Bay Ski Lane. Now what it's showing here is the actual holes and where they're placed right now, not where they're supposed to be moved to. So they're supposed to move 50 meters away from the jetty. So that image would depict what it should look like in the future.
So, is that?
Yeah, through the chair, my understanding is that those are the correct updated coordinates for the pole as the poles as they are, will be moved.
The coordinates are correct, the poles in the image are wrong. That's actually depicting where they are right now, not where they're going to be placed.
Okay, that's something
I can help you with that offline if you like.
Further questions? Yeah. Oh, no, I've got one for Lyle, I've got a few, so I'm just letting you on. Get go.
Yeah, there's another mapping thing. I raised that in the agreement is you only have one ski lane at Waterford Creek, but the map has two. It's still got the south. So you just told us the maps are correct. So I'm a bit confused of we're going to have two lanes or one lane.
So as I outlined, beginning, the attachment A has the panel's recommendations, not the staff's recommendations. So they are correct as per the panel's recommendations, but it's up to the council to tell us today what if they would like to proceed with the panel's recommendations or the staff's recommendations in regard to a small number of matters. But so the officer's recommendation is that we have one ski lane there, which is why it's not shown in the attachment A.
And that's covered by the resolution with the changes to be made to it. So there's one ski lane.
Yeah, but I thought I understood the panel had gone and said, oh, okay, we'll just go with one lane.
We do know, yes.
Yeah. Well, why is the map still got two?
Because that's covered by the change in that resolution is approved that with the changes now recommended by the staff.
Okay. Sorry.
So Lyle, I've got a panel member that might go.
Just want to clarify because I was on the panel.
Oh.
That these changes to the ski lanes, the panel agreed with the further recommendations of the staff. Yep. So we were happy with the changes to the ski lanes. It was only the communication devices recommendation that the panel was happy with where we arrived at.
I understand. I was just talking technically, so I just thought the maps hadn't been brought up, but I'll be corrected to say that they're going to.
Well, I think the communications devices is the only clause that's subject to one or the other. The change in ski lanes, we were satisfied after the further recommendation of the staff that we were reducing that.
Yeah, understood. Yeah. All I'm just trying to understand now has been told me the map is going to be updated after this to reflect the decision. Okay, cool.
And the same with the ones at Willow Bay and
that's right.
Luke Road, they will be updated to show a single ski lane.
Yeah, sorry, I missed that point. I didn't realise the maps are yet to be updated. In the bylaw section 41, you've got under the area where the special rules relating to specific locations. Just trying to understand why you focus on just one area of the lake in Wanaka. No vessel is permitted to approach the shore within the area identified as Roy's Bay water ski lane. So, but I'm just trying to understand why you just focused on that one area.
Perhaps you can provide the context.
Through the chair, with the I'm assuming that's the Ely Point ski lane. Ely Point is a unique ski lane, different to the rest in that, given the conflict in the Ely Point area, we've faced the choice of having no ski lane or coming up with a different way of approaching it. That is what is called a launch lane. So vessels can take off from that area, but not come in and do the big looping arc with the water skier on behind. So that provision speaks to that.
Okay, so no vessels to approach the shore, but if I'm coming back in to recover my vessel, I've launched it and then go out, means I can't come back in and put it on the trailer and take a shore again.
That is, the chair, that is a very narrow area just off the two launch lane poles and not in the vicinity, or it does not block the area of the launch and retrieval.
Right, thank you. Okay, yep, thank you.
Okay, non-powered communication. Where does the 200 metres come from?
So, through the chair, 200 metres, there is a national maritime law for, vessels cannot travel 5 knots or above within 200 metres of the shoreline. And in our district, certainly in all the busy areas, we have 5 knot markers depicting that area. It's a distance that boaters are familiar with, and there is education that goes around that, so that distance, that dimension was chosen to line up with that and line up with those markers that would indicate where you were able to go.
Okay, so have we had any trouble with non-powered craft outside the 200 metres? Oh, so like 200 metres away from shore, let's say, the last how many years since this was last reviewed?
Through the chair, we, in conversations with Harbour Master, who is here, who could add more to this, times and Pigeon Island has been brought up as an example where people have taken kayaks, for example, out past that 200 metre mark, got into trouble, had no way of communicating, and that is one of the reasons that drives our standing.
Can I just ask a question to Quentin, with regards to what you put forward for the communication devices? Can you just explain why you think that's of benefit to not improve the kind of safety aspect of it?
I think we thought it was good advice. And I suppose there's an aspect of personal responsibility. We felt the 200 metres thing was probably hard to, and particularly when it talked between 50 and 200 metres, it's a hard thing to administer in that you're sort of guessing how far away they are, and suddenly they require to have a radio or a phone once they breach a nominal threshold, it sort of seemed. But look, in general, we thought it, it's good advice that we provide to people that they should carry a thing. We just didn't think it needed to sit within the bylaw, and that people could choose. And that if people are participating in action sports like wing foiling and kite surfing, they've got their own networks of people keep an eye on them and each other, and they go and help each other and stuff like that. We just didn't. And look, as I said, it's not something I'm going to die in the ditch over. It's just the position that we came to and we're comfortable with, and it is well within the powers of council to choose the alternate today. One thing I would note is that about the week following our hearing panel recommendation, Nelson came out with a slightly different view of it as well, which did require communication devices. So I think equally both the valid. I just don't. It's just I didn't really think that kite foilers and things really needed to have a phone on them.
Thank you. And I guess the same question to officers with regards to, because obviously we've got commercial entities that may rent some of this equipment, which puts another layer, I guess, around lack of experience, etc. So just your own view on that. Is it just a case of following maritime recommendations? Is that your position, or is it more than that?
Through the chair, I think with the commercial operations, they are, even the rental operations, they're guided by Maritime New Zealand maritime transport operating plans, or if they maybe a kayak operation, they've got a benchmark sort of set of standard operating procedures and supervision requirements for the people that they rent to. The thinking wasn't necessarily directed at that group.
No. Okay, thank you.
Further questions, councillors?
We need to clarify exactly what's covered by that clause 19 and the variation between the two options.
Yeah, that'll be good.
So can I go to So the clause 19 relates to communication devices. The hearing panel's recommendation was that we amended the provision so that one form of communication is required to be carried by a person in charge of any powered vessel or any vessel greater than 6 metres in length. The officer's further recommendation after the hearing panel meetings was that those provisions are amended so that any powered vessel is required to carry 2 forms of communication, and any non-powered vessel more than 200 metres from the shore is required to carry at least 1 form of communication. So that's the difference. There's a step up in the number of devices for each of those categories.
Sorry, I might ask a question, but clarification on that, on what you just said there, because we've gone from the panel thing of criminal code by any powered vessel greater than 6 metres, but in the staff one, there's no mention of 6 metres, so it's any powered vessel.
Yep.
So that's quite a, that's another significant change to the.
So on a jet ski, you need 2 forms of communication. So on a jet ski, you need 2 forms of
Yeah,
communication.
so someone on a jet ski could have 2 forms of communication
Under that recommendation.
under that one, and all non-powered, so if I'm out on my kayak, I've got to have 1.
If you want to
But
go.
going back to the other one, someone on jet ski wouldn't have to have any communication either.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Something, yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just further clarification on Councillor Bart's point. So the officer's version is that anything between 0 and 200 metres, there is no requirement, just to clarify.
Yeah, understood. Sorry,
Yeah.
Okay. So the way we're going to deal with this, whoever moves this is going to nominate which one A will be, whether it be the hearing panel or the officers one. And then what we'll do is we'll split it on just that one clause. So we'll do 1 through to, what's that, 5, is it?
Yeah, 1 through to 4.
We'll just go 1 to 4, 6 and 7, we'll vote on that one, and then we'll just do 5 separately. And obviously, if it passes, it passes, and I take it, if it doesn't pass, it defaults to the other one.
And just to note, you now have an 8, remember that to make.
Oh, the 8, yes, sorry, and the 8, yeah.
No, you haven't got it because they wouldn't have been moved.
Oh, okay, right. All right, let's see how this goes.
So what did you just say, sir?
So basically, as I understand from what the mayor said, we will vote collectively on 1 to 4, 6 to 8.
Yeah.
Then you'll,
Back to.
depending on who.
What the move is.
You'll
Yeah.
move the entire, and the person who moves the entire will nominate either 5A or 5B. We've now called them A and B. You'll then vote on 1 to 4, 6 to 8, and then you'll vote on 5A or B. And if that, if that passes, that passes. If it fails, then you'll get someone to renominate the alternative one.
An alternative motion, 5B.
Sorry, confusing, but understand you do.
All right.
I'll be here. I'll hear to it.
Standing order, lovely, right. So I'm going to open it up. Anyone want to move?
I'll move.
Move with,
I will move with the officer's recommendation.
5B.
5B,
yes,
that the, yeah,
okay.
and.
Do I have a seconder?
I'll second that.
Thank you. Now it's open to discussion.
Um.
Hang on, no, you moved it. Oh, yeah, you're allowed to speak at the end, sorry, yes.
The
You go.
big front and the big.
Yep.
can't I? But
Go for it.
look, I don't have a lot to say on it. Look, thank you to the panel, and I do understand where they were coming from with that, with the communications devices. I understand when you're thinking about wind foiling and some of those activities that you do on a sunny day when you're close to the shore and you can get back in quite quickly. That, yeah, it makes absolute sense to sort of not have to have something near in sight, but having the mention of Pigeon Island and remembering some of the issues that have happened with some of the kayakers out on the water and the people that go to rescue them, that lake can be really calm and you get out there and you're having a good old time. And I guess if you're from somewhere else and you're not used to that lake and you're not aware of how quickly it can pick up, you can get a long way out and before you know it, that wind can whip up and the fetch is, you know, the wind from Kingston has driven up a massive swell really, really quickly, and I've been in it, and it's terrifying. So yeah, for that reason, I think it's really important that we do require people to have communication out there, at least one if you're in a kayak. And if we're lumping those all together, why not make it apply to everybody? I'm sure most people have a phone, you just need to get a bit of proof. thing and put it in your life vest, and it makes everybody safer, especially the people that go out to rescue people in trouble and often horrendous conditions that take people by storm. Oh, it's a little lot. Okay,
No, it's all good.
that's my reasoning.
Okay. Bob?
Yeah, I have a slightly different point of view. I do support some of the intention of this, but I think it's going over the top to expect, I say the person on jet ski to have two forms of communication. And also comes back to self-responsibility. You know, if, the person in Pigeon Island, most probably even with the bylaw, maybe wouldn't have the communication either. If they haven't got it without the bylaw, they're most probably not going to have it with the bylaw because they're not responsible lake users. So you've got to, you know, I think through education and advisory notes and that we should be putting the message out there. But we're starting to, we're going to dumb everyone down and have to have a bylaw to tell them to take responsibility for their own safety on the water. Then we've got some issues. So I don't support the, I go with the panel's recommendation from the staff. I understand what the staff are trying to do, but I think they'll look at it a more practical way.
Thank you. Thank you to the staff and the hearing panel, because this is quite a big and complicated, meaty one. But I also am erring on the side of the hearing panel's recommendation for the communication devices. I think that the two forms for all powered and the 200 metres rule unpowered is a little bit too much, and it does come down to, I think, the recommendation is good, and it does come down to people need to use their common sense sometimes rather than be restricted by a bylaw.
Yeah, well, so having said on the panel, we did discuss this at length, and I was quite satisfied with where we were at. I can see the reasoning for the officer's recommendation, but I am happy with where the panel are at.
Just check. Any further comment before I hand it over to the seconder and the final row of reply from the movement? Where you go?
I support 5B because I think we've got a growing number of visitors to this region, and I think even though the stop's in place with commercial entities, I think it actually informs education. So I think it drives us to be safer. So for me, yes, it is a bit grandmotherly, as Quentin uses that term. But I think it does drive us towards more cautionary safety in this lake, as we know it is very dangerous and can turn at a dime. So yeah, support 5B.
And around or out?
Oh, look, I've really got nothing else to say. I think it's the first time around.
Okay. So we'll do councillors 1 through to 4, 6 through to 8. All those in favour?
Aye.
All those against? None. Okay. Motion 5. B, sorry. 5B, councillors, all in favour? Against? 6, failed. Okay, so on that one, is anyone going to perhaps, given that Lyle and Mel both spoke to bylaw? Okay, you wanna?
Even though we went on the hearings panel, I'm happy to.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. It makes sense, yeah, to avoid some of the debate. Okay, so Mel was the mover, Lyle was the second. 5A, so any further discussion on 5A? All those in favour? Against? Radio, it'll be 6-5, sorry. I've just.
You voted, you
At least I admit it. It's the reverse of what it was.
There's nothing stopping them from voting.
You can change your mind.
No, it's just the principle. Anyway, okay. All good. We got there in the end. Thank you, team.
Thank you very much for all your work on that.
Thank you, Danny Dennis.
Well done. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Quentin, for your email.
Yeah, it's
They don't.
yeah, I think maybe.
Yeah, because it feels like we didn't vote. Support it then.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, but.
Oh, we did, right,
Yeah.
that's clear.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's right.
excellent.
Okay. Freedom campaign.
Thank you, Chair, councillors. I'm joined by Maria and Amy today, who oversee the responsible camping program. And alongside us is Luke, who will work with Amy and a number of staff to collaborate on this paper in front of us, and also to outline the way forward. I'd like to acknowledge the members of the community that have spoken and shared their experience today on public forum. And we would also like to note that there's quite a bit in this document. I'll hand over Luke's short list of the scene with the purpose and some of the aspects to note. And then we're available to answer any questions.
Thanks, Ken. So yeah, introduced myself previously, so I won't do that again, but I'll just get the team who's here to introduce themselves and their positions.
Kia ora koutou, my name is Marie Day, I'm the Community Partnerships Manager at QLDC.
I'm Amy Galloway, I'm the Responsible Camping Programme Manager working.
That's right. So yeah, brief introduction from me. So the purpose of the report is threefold. So we've got sharing information that officers have currently to provide context to the perceived problems associated with freedom camping. Secondly, we provide an overview of the different tools that are available to council and their associated advantages and disadvantages. And thirdly, asking council to determine that freedom camping bylaw is the most effective way to deal with the perceived problems. And so those are the three main purposes of the report. Just a few other things from me. We recognise that there might be a range of different questions around how the different tools might be applied. For example, the specific nature, scale and location in which they might be applied, or the potential rules that might apply under to them. Just want to emphasise that those things, it's our intention that those things will be informed by the expert assessments that are currently underway, and we'll be exploring those with councillors in the coming weeks and months. Further, I want to emphasise that we're at the beginning of this process to develop a regulatory response, and we're not asking council to make any specific decisions on the form of a regulatory response at this time. So what the determination does, it effectively allows council to continue to work on the development of the bylaw. And just one more thing, so a minor correction that we'd like to make in table 3 of the report on page 94, which relates to infringements that have been issued. The columns, so the months at the top have been incorrectly arranged, but the numbers are correct. So there's no error in the total infringements. So just to bring to council's attention, so if everybody's got that, so column 1 should read January 2025 at the top, column 2 should read November 2024, and column 3 should read December 2024. So it's just, unfortunately, the typo's got a bit jumbled up there, so apologies for that, just making that clear. That's it for me, thank you.
Thanks, Luke.
Questions, councillors?
Yeah. Forgive me for not completely understanding that we're just providing guidance that we're still on the track of a freedom camping bylaw. Is that right? Okay. Given that, well, if this does go, we are still on this track, when can we have one in place?
Good question. Through you, Chair, without being held to account on specific dates, but we
Oh no.
We will.
Can this be enacted by next summer?
We're working towards being back at this table with something in the September timeframe to enable us to ensure that we've gone for this summer with the tools that are required.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to, well, firstly, thanks for the report, and it is, you know, I reflect on the stories we were told today, and I can give you a million more of those around the district in the last few months. Paragraph 16 in the table, figure 1, you sort of try to use campermate as an indication of how many overnight campers. Have you got any quantification, any clarification of that? I mean, surely the number is way, way bigger than that. This is a relative measure of, Is that how you view that, or is it?
So it's indicative of users of the app. When they use their app, the night before and then again in the morning, Campermate determines that they have stayed at that location, and that they have marked out sites that are paid campsites and free campsites, so they would have checked the free campsites.
Okay. And look, the most important thing I think from that table was the quantum, is that we are it's twice as prevalent in our district than any other district in New Zealand, so that the issue is bigger here than anywhere. And I suppose the final question is, how do we engage with the NZMCA in a productive way from this point in order to avoid the previous challenges?
Through you, Chair. So, we acknowledge that the NZMCA is certainly an interested party, and we anticipate that they will participate in the upcoming process. But I suppose we can't predict what their position will be. What our focus is really to make sure that the process that we're following is robust as possible and not vulnerable, or as least vulnerable as possible to challenge. We're anticipating their formal recognition of their position once they have the opportunity to do so.
Okay, thank you. Kevin? Yeah, a couple of things. I mean, the first one you may not be able to answer, but do you know what the rationale was for the recent extension to the time for compliance for the South Australian vehicles? We got any information on why that extension was made by the government?
Through the chair, and I haven't got the exact wording, but my understanding is there was challenges with the warranting process and the lack of people available to do those warrants, and that was putting pressure on people that are trying to do the right thing. And the minister acknowledged that the visitors, both internal visitors and those visiting our country, they want that process to be fair and able to be accessed in a timely manner. So that extends it.
My other one is just clarification. So option G is presented on page 100, the list of options. It says combined approach, and then at the end of it says which includes a freedom camping bylaw. Later on, about page 111, I think it is, goes into more detail about the options. And option G, there says combined approach that does not include a freedom camping bylaw. Is that?
So option G is intended to be it could a combined approach of any of the regulatory responses that are presented earlier in the report, but it could take any form really. Ultimately, it would be up to council to determine what that combination of, if they wanted to go, if you were minded to choose option G of some form of regulatory approach, it could include freedom camping bylaw, or it could not. But it doesn't have to be mutually exclusive.
Yeah. Okay, no, that's good. So yeah, that was my question really, was does it or does it not, but it could be either or.
Technically it could do.
Thank you.
Thank you. To Councillor Bartlett's question, I actually did read the statement from Minister Upton on her reasoning. What she said was she actually consulted. I'm just wondering whether we as an organisation were aware of any consultation and were we asked to submit?
Through the chair, yes, it was an informal consultation. That's what it was called. It was not formal. They did ask councils for their opinion. We recommended that the extension was not made. We did not feel this was appropriate to extend.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
My apologies.
Oh, sorry. We made an informal feedback, and then there was the formal consultation that we put forward as well. Yeah, so sorry, so twice.
We had our
We put it twice.
Yeah. Okay. And then secondly, when this new act comes into play, which is the Self-Contained Motor Vehicles Legislation Act 2023, what powers does that give us over the old act which we're working on, which is the Freedom Camping Act? 2011. Does it give us more teeth to enable to enforce, or what's the difference between the two in terms of enforcement?
One of the key elements of the self-contained vehicles was the more strengthened regulations around the fixed toilet, and the other part of it was the increase in fines. So they went from $200 to $400 about a year and a half ago. So that was another key part of that legislation. So I think it's just an update.
So the wastewater treatment has to be fixed in the vehicle.
Toilet needs to be fixed, but it can still be a cassette style toilet. Unfortunately, it doesn't need to be flushable, or it can be compostable as long as it's fixed in the vehicle, is my understanding.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. My question is really more about trying to ensure that our community understands the big picture, and it's a long story. So maybe tell it succinctly, but the question related to it is, we don't currently have a bylaw. It'd be great to just explain that to anybody watching this as to why. Currently, I guess it's just to confirm what rules can we use, what enforcement rules can we use currently without a bylaw. We've heard speakers today, and rightly so, everyone's really concerned about this. So I want to enable our community to understand what we can't do and why, and what we can do and how. Does that make sense?
Through the chair, I'll take a stab at that succinctly. So yeah, it is a complex picture, and so just on your first point, why we don't have a bylaw currently. So the bylaw was challenged through judicial review by the New Zealand Motor Caravan Association. They challenged the bylaw on a number of points, but the things that they were successful on, there was two things in particular, which were that the bylaw took into account effects of freedom camping on neighbouring land that wasn't owned or managed by council, in terms of amenity and economic effects. So in a nutshell, that's what they were successful on. And importantly, just on that point, that provides important learnings for us for this process to make sure that we are not including those sorts of considerations in the next bylaw. So what rules are we currently using, and what have we got available to us?
Yeah, so the context then is that we have an enabling law that means that people can camp anywhere unless we prohibit it, otherwise they can continue to do so. The new bylaw will hopefully be in place by September, but in the current time, what can we use?
Yes, so at the moment, what the team are doing is using the Reserves Act as, so it has the opposite starting point as the Freedom Camping Act. So it takes a prohibited approach as the starting point on reserve land only. So that's an important distinction, is that it does just apply to land that's classified as reserve. So that is being used to prevent short-term residential accommodation, I think it's termed in the Act, the Reserves Act, on reserve land. And in addition to that, there are options under the traffic and parking bylaw to manage overnight parking in areas that suffer from effects of overnight parking that prevent the proper use of the park. For example, at Queenstown Event Centre, there was a recent resolution related to that. But critically, any decision under the traffic and parking bylaw must only be related to traffic and parking and the other purposes set out in the bylaw. So that's an important distinction between those different tools, is that they're very much focused on managing reserve land, and traffic and parking, obviously dealing with traffic parking matters. Whereas the Freedom Camping Act allows us to look a bit more holistically at all those areas.
Thank you.
Yeah, through the chair, a question, and I think this is probably Mr. Bailey might be able to answer this one. We all know what has developed around this and the situation that we're in, and it's often been referred to as that we've gone into battle with a pop gun. We've heard from residents and business owners. I think we're all well aware around the table of what's confronting us at the moment, and maybe to just complete the picture is, what's the environment that our ambassadors have found themselves in from time to time?
I can answer that through the chair. At the start of the summer, we were finding conversations, you know, with campers really positive. Over the past few weeks, just in the sort of interactions that they are reporting to me, there does seem to be a little bit more, I'll use the word conflict, but I don't mean, you know, aggression. And it's a little bit like, when we're asking people to consider local residents and their choices, oh, I know I'm allowed to be here, I know you have no bylaw, and we're getting that sort of pushback. So at the start of the summer, maybe not that well informed, and maybe people just taking a little bit of a punt like they do every summer on you know, where they can freedom camp. And then more recently, people seem a little bit more informed, and yeah, it's sort of more lack of self-awareness, I would say, among some. But on the whole, positive conversations, but they're really handling a wide range of conversations with varying types of campers, you know, domestic tourists who've come specifically here because there is no bylaw, along with you know, international tourists who really don't know much, and what they were allowed to do in one district, they assume they can do, you know, throughout New Zealand. So it's a variety of conversations, I suppose.
I think through you, Chair, adding to that too, you know, we operate within the 6th largest district in the country. We're not only one of the largest landowners. You know, you've got DOC, LINZ, NZTA. We've got big holdings and high country and farm stations. There's a lot of experience right now that's been relayed today from the community that's been mapped out across many holdings of land. And you know, we're responsible for a parcel or parcels, but it's certainly having touch points across that. And that backs up what you're saying about the experience of ambassadors. For the most part, people genuinely come here to do the right thing and leave the right footprints and take photos and leave the place tidy. But certainly just on sheer volume, as Councillor Smith points out, you know, the numbers we are dealing with are significant.
Thank you. Lisa?
Thank you. Paragraph 6, and it was raised by one of our public forum speakers this morning, where freedom camping is deemed to be within 200 metres of a formed road. Is there any lever around not being allowed to camp actually on a formed road?
Chair, so that's the definition of freedom camping. So anything that falls out of that is not freedom camping, but that's not what you're asking. So if you're referring to the development of freedom camping bylaw, for example, yes, you certainly can produce rules in a freedom camping bylaw that would manage that.
So specifically, just on a road, we could potentially eliminate that.
Through a freedom camping bylaw, if in areas where our expert analysis demonstrates that is going to cause a problem within the scope of the Freedom Camping Act, then we certainly could.
And my second question around that overnight parking option. Have we looked at all at creating resident parking only overnight options or signage or permits where we could, in our residential areas, say only resident overnight stopping?
Through you, Chair, that's not something that we've been looking at through this process, simply because that's focused on residential use of roads, whereas we're focused on freedom camping. But I understand that the traffic and parking bylaw provides scope for that.
Okay, thank you. And one last question. I'm seeing a lot of online acknowledgement that freedom camps all through the country at capacity and therefore pushing into more suburban areas. Have we got data around growth around the rest of the country and what other communities are experiencing?
I can provide some data from in one of my sheets here from our district. So this is from Pings as well. So stays at overnight stays at campsite were 13% up on last summer. That's December through February. That's the data we have, and that was actually driven by stays at free camps, which was up 24%, but stays at paid campsites was only 7%.
Thank you for your answers. Good luck with the policy.
We're Nicky Lyle and have a chat myself.
Thanks. Just a couple of questions on enforcement, because it's not really gonna work unless we can ping people for it, right? Looking at the attitudes of people at the moment. So with foreigners, when they're, tourists, and they live in, when they come in the events and they get a fine and they leave the country, can we make them pay that money? Are they allowed to leave? How do we recover that if they choose to just get on a plane?
I believe the enforcement team have a good relationship with the rental car companies. If it's a rental, under the Freedom Camping Act, it gets assigned to your car registration. So I suppose if you're trying to sell it on, return your rental, there is sort of onus on you to pay it, but obviously some people don't, but I believe there's even further action you can take.
Okay, that's great. And yeah, also in terms of enforcement, what we had with the last bylaw with this issue that the bylaw sort of pushed everybody out into the, and I know we're not talking about this today, but it's only the best way if you can enforce it, right? Bylaw's only the best way if you've got people on the ground making sure it's adhered to. And so in terms of pushing people out to the edges and the rural areas where there is a greater fire risk, how are we going to commit to resourcing it? Because I think that matters. To me, we need to have people in these local communities, these distant places, who can actually enforce.
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Chair, we will need to scope that, and just on what Amy shared, coming back to Councillor Guy's request for the national data, we suspect it's growing everywhere. So if you just look at the numbers we're dealing with, we'll need to come back, because what we do know is that the community will expect a response, and we need to make sure we can enforce that response.
Yeah, exactly.
So we haven't got an answer today, but we're certainly acutely aware of all the machinations of the options and issues that have been identified and tabled, and then what do we need to do about being across those.
So just there's that parallel stream of enforcement at the same time as the bylaw. And just the last question, and it's gone from my head. This does that, I'm never going to give my answer, am I? It was simple actually, and look, it was along the lines of where Gavin was going. We can implement multiple tools, but still agree that the bylaw is the best option for certain spaces, presumably, because I tend to think that in some places, hotspots like the event centre, we have other tools that are the best approach in that area, but for other areas, the bylaw will be a better approach. So have you got any thoughts on that? And do we look at multiple tools and?
So through you, Chair, what the report quite clearly tries to say is that we think the Freedom Camping Bylaw is the best well-rounded tool to manage land, manage freedom camping across all of the land that council owns or manages. However, we're quite careful in indicating in the report is that all the other tools that the regulatory tools, they aren't included from being used in association with the Freedom Camping Bylaw. So you're right in that they sort of can be different layers, but I suppose it's important part of this process is to, and through the next stage, get our expert assessments done and advice to you in due course is that we'll be able to give you a better picture on the more specific range of options that might take place in a regulatory framework. So yeah, that sort of provide you with some context.
Sort of. I guess ahead of the next summer, it's a strange time frame because a new council will be coming on and you're wanting to agree something in September and go out for it might not be in place, right, for next summer. So it would be good in the meantime. And I guess the question is, can you look at other tools for hotspots, like we've done for the event centre, that we could use in those hotspots to limit problems? And would that undermine your bylaw approach or not?
So through you, Chair, just picking up on your point, Councillor and Luke's. So yes, we can. You point, and it's just been real crystal about September because Councillor White put on the spot. That's when we expect to be back here for a document that's bound and approved ready for us for action for the summer. So we've got a number of milestones to go through, which includes consulting with community, stakeholders, and also parties of interest. And being quite clear right now, there's a significant number of staff who work in this space. Coming back to a bespoke response to what we've heard today from residents in this township, we would need to take street by street and work through the other bylaws. If you look at the blended tool of what we're having to use through the Reserves Act, which is 1977, very clearly prescribed, it's a fine of $800. Now, you know, but again, to actually administer that requires quite a bit of work through the enforcement, because it was never intended for the purposes per se. It's actually about how we use it. Trespass is another one. But again, to enforce trespass requires quite a bit of time, effort and energy. So as Luke's rightly pointed out, there's a suite of how we look at this, including a bylaw, but it's making sure that for the most part, this community understands the tools that we will have in play in September.
And if I could just add one last point to that. So we're intending a workshop with councillors in not too distant future, and we'll be able to explore these with you and get guidance on the type of responses that you might like to see where. So that's the opportunity. Yeah.
Just briefly then, following on from that, have you got any hotspots you've been to the event centre car park? Are there any hotspots you've already put through to traffic and parking administrators, bylaw administrators to have a look at, or not? Or have you got a list that you're looking at doing?
Through the chair, no, we haven't. Haven't had a level of consideration of that at the moment, but the traffic and parking bylaw is currently being relooked at.
Yeah.
So there
You know,
will
I
be
was wondering if you
opportunity.
actually, you know, like we did with the convention in the car park, have you got anything else like that ready to go?
Not yet, but we will be having those conversations through the policy team with around the traffic and parking bylaw to see if there's any.
Okay, and the last one, just following up about the Reserves Act, noting, and I think one of the other criteria under review was not having a blanket regulation. So if you continue using the Reserves Act for reserves and the Freedom Camping Act for the rest, that wouldn't be considered blanket coverage, or would it under a judicial sentiment?
Through you, Chair, so on that point, councillors, we would be very keen to avoid having to test that scenario.
Okay.
And then coming back to your first point, through you, Chair, just remind me of your first point, about the roading. So we have had the inquiry about, you know, and we've heard from residents today, but it wouldn't again be the panacea. So potentially if you started going by street or however you zoned it, it could be time restricted. You know, there's a whole range of aspects that under that current roading bylaw might actually implicate an impact on the community that we're trying to look out for. So it's proving to be quite an interesting summer, to use the right terms, and we're working with the tools that we currently have to take this forward. Hence how we're here, and we want to come back to you in April to have a detailed workshop discussion with this audience.
Thank you, thanks.
And we're assuming it'll end in the summer.
Okay, just to round it out, so from what I heard, if we go down a bylaw, private landowner concerns, are they not considered in the bylaw at all?
So it can only through you, Chair, can only consider.
Speak up so I can.
It can only consider council controlled or managed land or any NZTA land with agreement from the chief executive of NZTA. And so in terms of impacts, it's only impacts on any council controlled managed land or the NZTA land.
And so what criteria are you looking at then?
So the 3 points that we're allowed to make a bylaw for are set out in section 11 of the Act, and those relate to access, they relate to health and safety of people who visit the land, and they relate to protecting the area, which is quite important.
The
area of QLDC owned or managed land only, regardless.
So of the fines issued, what have they been for?
Through the chair, under the Freedom Camping Act, without a bylaw, we can still infringe for non-self-contained vehicles or vehicles without a valid warrant displayed. So the bumper sticker at the back of the car is not a valid warrant. It has to be displayed where your rego is at the front of the screen. So all of the Freedom Camping Act infringements are to do with the warrant, basically either a lack of warrant or a fraudulent warrant.
So have we infringed anyone for toileting?
Got a kitchen. No, but it's difficult to catch.
Yeah, have we, have we, no, well, let's not get to this. Have we fined anyone for spitting publicly with the toothpaste? Have we fined anyone for hanging out a clothesline?
There is under the Freedom Camping Act, there is an $800 fine for depositing waste in a receptacle other than a waste receptacle or something like to that effect. So I do believe in March a few were issued for rubbish dumping. But I'm not sure that would go as far as a clothesline say, but yes, it's difficult to catch in the act with the registration of the car and the so.
Seems everyone else seems to be catching up apart from us, anyway. Okay. With that, anyone going to move? Oh, thank you, Gavin. Thank you. Open to discussion. We've had a good discussion. What's Esther saying?
Yeah, just a couple of points. It's interesting that the matter was of low significance. I just wanted to highlight that, and I accept that technically it may be of low significance. It's of high importance, and I think we need to reckon and high profile in our district. And yeah, I mean, just going to Nikki's point, I mean, when we did have a bylaw in place, it was a significantly useful tool in managing the issue. So while yes, there's resourcing and whatever we can deal with all that, but we know that if we have an appropriate bylaw in place, it does help us. It's not perfect, but it does help us, and it goes a long way to helping us manage the problem. So yeah, let's do the hard work and get something out there and go into next summer with the boxing gloves on. The responsible camping thing's interesting because I don't see a huge amount of responsible camping going on right now. Is that I think unfortunately I don't agree that most are doing the right thing. I think there's a lot of entitlement, a lot of misuse going on currently, by at least half the users, I would say.
Okay, just wanted to read some numbers here. So of the 73,000 estimated self-contained vehicles in New Zealand, only 32 of them have met the new certification. So obviously there's about 50,000 uncertified and they've got a year to do it. I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. So yeah, this problem won't go away without us interfering. So.
Just a comment, if I may, just as an NZMCA member, I feel frustrated and embarrassed that present situation has been precipitated by the NZMCA, and it's a feeling a lot of other members have expressed to me as well. The irony is, from my experience, the absolute majority of NZMCA members go to a formal camping area, and they want facilities. So unfortunately, this situation has opened up an opportunity for those who don't want to pay. They want to freeload and take advantage of it.
Thank you, through the chair. I say this with some caution. We're assuming that it's going to stop at the end of summer. And with the growth in van lifers and some of the pictures that our ambassadors have submitted down to interiors of vans actually being constructed in our reserve areas into dwellings and our accommodation challenges, I'd really like to see us looking at all the levers, particularly around this camping on formed roads and in residential areas. And I appreciate it's really challenging if we put no overnight parking. In effect, as you've said, we may be punishing the very residents that need access to amenity outside of their homes and businesses. So I'd like us to be looking at all those levers around creating ways to hit it not being on formed roads and to enable our residents to access it. And I don't know, I mean, an icy cold wash off in the lake is not going to be as appealing in the middle of July, but then I think we might find other public amenities actually being hit with people who are using this as accommodation options longer than camping, but they're using it as residents. So I think we're being a bit optimistic, thinking that in a few weeks, when it gets colder, the problem's going to go away.
I guess I always kind of come back to this, that I just find it so frustrating that John Key wrote this back in 2011, and I'm kind of in a way pleased to hear that other districts are starting to feel the pain, because what we heard 2 years ago is that other districts didn't see this as a problem, and therefore to lobby central government to make any changes was never going to happen because they want freedom campers. That's the kind of messaging that I understood. So it'll be a long way away, but maybe in 10 years' time, we'll have a prohibitive, central government law, which will mean that people won't camp anywhere and that they will have a bylaw that says they can in certain places, for example. So it'll be totally switched. So yeah, it's just good to hear, and it'd be great to keep an eye on what's happening in other districts as a, opportunity to learn from that as well.
Well said. I agree. And just to back up Lisa's point, I think I said it before, it'd be great not to just spend the next bit of time just working on the bylaw. I think we need to be working on enforcement and all those other levers that we can use to stamp out those hotspots, bearing in mind that we don't want to penalise locals. But if we have those conversations with people in those areas, and also, I suppose, bearing in mind, if you push someone out of one area, they're potentially going to go into another. But it's all like a problem. But thanks, Hughie.
Okay, before I go to Devon, I'm just going to reiterate Nikki and Lisa. We've got to start stepping up on enforcement a little bit more. And I know that's challenging because, look, as you raised the point with heightened conflict risk with the recipients of a pretty, let's say, first conversation they might have. But I think we've really got to start nailing down some of these hotspots that are coming to the community. I think it's extremely frustrating that we can sit here and our hands are tied by, as you say, a law written in 2011 for a World Cup that's long gone. Anyway, get bylaw sorted as quickly as you possibly can, is my view. But anyway, over to you, Devon.
Yep. So as some of you know, my wife and I spent 14 months travelling overland through Africa and Australia in a car. So a lot of that time was spent freedom camp. We had a handful of nights in Cairo, Wadi Halfa, Cape Town, Fremantle and Brisbane, where we were staying inside buildings, but the rest of it was camping. If we were ever in an urban area, we were staying in a campsite, paid campsite, if there was one available. Sometimes we were to get out of town, but I have zero tolerance for the type of behaviour that we've seen photographs of and the reports that we've been given today and other times as well. There are numerous options around this town and district for people to stay in a recognised camping area. It's either a campsite that's provided in town or dock campsites. We've got loads of dock campsites around, all sorts of options that people don't need to park on Park Street and use the lake as their bathroom. So, like I say, I've got zero tolerance for that sort of behaviour. And the people that we see coming to camp here in those types of situations should know better. And it's just irresponsible what's been happening in our district. So that's why, I've moved this, because I do support that we need a bylaw. Obviously, all these other acts of parliament and policies and bylaws are in place, but they obviously aren't enough because we've had those this summer and we've still got problems. So if the bylaw is what's needed to try and tighten up around the areas, the edges of those, then that's what we need to do. And as others have said, the enforcement of that is key as well. So we've also got, given what's happened this summer, I'd like to think we've got ample evidence of the adverse effects of what's been happening that can support a bylaw being brought into place. So that's why I'm supporting it. So
good, thank you. Okay, with that, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? None. Motion carried. Thank you, councillors.
Thank you, Stan.
We'll just take a break for 10 and be back at 3. Item 5, policy re-council meetings. Take it away, John.
Thank you, Chair. Through the chair, please note that we have made a slight amendment to page 3 of the draft policy, that is category A for page 133 of the agenda, to update the definition of meeting to include an urgent meeting. The category of urgent meeting was introduced by a recent amendment to the 2002 Local Government Act. Otherwise, I'll take the report as read, and we're happy to take your questions.
What is an urgent meeting?
An urgent meeting is a new category of meeting called by the chief executive if necessary, that is, if urgent matters need to be dealt with, following the triennial election, before the first meeting of the council has been called, and where there has been an application for a recount, such that the inaugural meeting has been delayed.
How about that?
Well, you should,
That logo space about 2 weeks to use by.
For 3 years.
Only if a recount's in play.
Maybe I should have asked that, please.
Well,
Okay.
Yes, through the chair, it's clarification on page, paragraph 18 of the report. Says the draft policy only, and it does not include recommendations of meetings for the Wanaka include the community board. We go to the policy on that 5.1 and it talks about meetings, an annual meeting schedule, meetings of council standing committees and the Wanaka include the community board. So is the community board in or out? I'm not based on it. The community board is not a committee of council, it's a separate society.
The secret.
Second handship.
So you remind me where exactly on the policy you're looking at here?
Page 3, right at the top, second paragraph down.
5.1, page 133. You're on page 133 a minute ago.
Yep. So, yeah, through the chair, yes, it's kind of recognising that, well, I suppose, for clarification, the board is acknowledged as being part of the annual schedule that's adopted by council, but for the purposes of the location policy, it's excluded.
Okay.
It's acknowledged as part of the schedule.
Okay,
but-
that's right.
But the policy doesn't define where the board.
So it'll still be listed in the schedule, but
Yes.
not in the location.
Yes.
I don't think the Wanaka community board want to have meetings in Arrowtown.
No,
Queenstown.
I don't think so.
I think the policy leaves it open for the community board to make its own choices.
Yeah, you gotta meet where
I'm happy to move the maximum comments on appropriate.
Question.
Yeah, there's sorry.
Couple of questions. Firstly, the policy, page 133 of the agenda talks about standing committee ordinary meetings, at least one meeting held in Arrowtown, Kawerau Ward, at least 3 meetings to be held in Wanaka Police Ward, and the rest to be held in Queenstown Ward. That might need to be justified by the Administration Committee. From that point of view, we only have about 4 meetings a year, because they're 12 weekly. So that would mean, to meet that obviously, that would mean all our meetings would be in Arrowtown and Wanaka. You might see some.
That means total.
But I don't know whether it should be, because it does talk about the annual meeting schedule. I wondered whether for that sort of frequency of meeting, whether it wouldn't be one, a term maybe in Arrowtown, 1 a year in Wanaka, and the other 2 a year and 2 or 3 a year in Queenstown.
I read it was collectively, the
Yeah, me too.
committees,
Right.
not just a committee.
Okay, so across all committees.
Yep.
Yes, right.
You're not that special.
Everything's too much.
Maybe you should have more than this.
Okay.
Through the chair.
Does it say that somewhere though? Right. Where does it say that? In that same paragraph.
It's not as specific as it
Just
could be.
I didn't read that into it anyway.
Yeah.
The other thing was just what are the costs and resource implications, I guess, for having the meetings in Wanaka and Arrowtown? I mean, it does talk to some degree about the technology aspect of it, but I mean, there must be a considerable cost to shift everyone out to Arrowtown, or I know we've got people in Wanaka as well, but you save money on my view, yeah.
Probably trolls are more expensive than one.
But I mean, there's a bit of a balance there, I guess, but overall, there's a cost.
I don't know, we've got the exact cost, haven't we? But effectively, we know that the majority of staff are domiciled and have their offices here, so it's largely the staff and travel costs and the time to travel around the district is probably the greatest additional cost of moving around.
And the time associated with setup of the room where it needs to be set up.
Yeah.
Cost of democracy again.
Yeah, well, that's right. I mean, there is.
But on the flip side, it costs everyone else.
Yeah, that's right. And then also noticed there was a term that Queenstown here is the legislatively designated admin centre. What legislation is that designated by?
The reference is in page 2 of the policy. It's the Local Government Otago Region Reorganisation Order 1989, page 2419. It reads, the administration headquarters of the Queenstown Lakes District Council shall be located in Queenstown. Give them that.
Wow. We might need to.
Those is stuff.
The plans officers to work for it.
It's really, then one other question about with the old meeting schedule, where does Queenstown East and Queenstown West, it's a company, but it's pretty irrelevant now, isn't it? Thanks.
Thank you. I've got a question and it's not meant to be personal to anyone broadly. Why are we leaving it up? And it might be because of the standing orders, but why are we leaving it to the chair to decide? And the other day we had somebody wanting to speak from Wanaka and they were told they could speak from over there and a link would be provided. And then they were told at the last minute that no, the chair had said no and they had to drive over. I'm just wondering why we would do that. Is it because the standing orders say something and we have to make a consequential amendment to the standing orders? Is there something we can do to make it less ambiguous? There's more certainty for people in Wanaka or Kingston or feel like it, that they can actually just get on Zoom and if they say, because it costs us to move over, but it costs them an awful lot to drive over it for day and all the cost of the petrol, loss of work. Can we, I mean,
I mean, I mean, you're correct. It's more that it's in consistency with standing orders. Standing orders enables joining by audio visual. It's kind of consistent with this, but because it's not a definite requirement, it does remain at the discretion of the chair. So this is sort of making it possible, but it still remains at the chair's discretion. And that would be an amendment either to this point or more likely to standing orders if you want to, if the council wanted to make that a more definite requirement.
I mean, if the council was minded to do it and the chairs were supportive, would we be able to make a consequential amendment to the standing orders on that limited point for this purpose only today to change that?
I mean, we don't have an item before us for changing standing orders. It would be best that we brought that back to another meeting.
Okay.
So at least we can prepare an appropriate report. It could even be through the chair's report, but.
Would you be able to make a note of it in the work program for the new triennium so that when the standing orders come up, then there's a specific, because some of what we talk about gets lost if the people go. But then it can be up to the next council and the new chairs to decide.
Okay, through the chair, just to sort of acknowledge that actually we do have it on the agenda register, the corporate map, to bring the new standing orders template to this council before July. So LGNZ have released a new template that is sort of in plain English that has adopted some new changes to legislation. And the intention is that we will bring this to this council to have a conversation around those sort of things.
Okay.
So that the incoming council can therefore benefit from the more plain English speak version of standing orders and make it more accessible. So we can make a note of that as something that would be considered through that conversation.
That'd be great. Thank you. Oh, and one other question. Was just around the technology. I remember when we talked about the Wanaka Queenstown sort of issues and making it sort of more comparable over there. We did talk about what we could do to that room to make sure that there weren't those issues with sound and so on and so forth. Have we exhausted all possibilities in terms of looking at that within reason? Just making it the sound quality better and so that it's not a disadvantage for
I can't confirm or deny whether we have, but happy to have that conversation again with the knowledge management team and venues team, just to see where that's at.
I think it would be good because it's specifically mentioned in here that that's a reason not to.
I just
Oh,
want
Let's hang on, let's try and just keep to the item before us.
Well, that is
It's
the
about
item
draft
before us.
policy, so
Well, it is the item before us.
not
but it's
about,
justification.
hang on, not about the retrofit of Armstrong.
Well, it talks about technology, so.
Well, let's
Keep going.
be heading Saturday, yeah.
Yeah, we had a meeting the other day, it was good, so it's
Okay.
fine.
Good.
Yeah, I just thought I was happy to move and I just got some great comments when,
Okay, so I'm gonna move it, so the second. Thank you, Matt. Discussion, where you
yeah, look, I'll just lead up brief comments. Look, I think this is positive. I think it's good to embrace, the differences between Wanaka and Queenstown. It was obviously part of the recommendations out of the report, and excuse me, I can't recall the name of the report offhand, the review. The investigation about the Wanaka.
local government action.
Yeah, report, and so, look, I think it's a positive step and it helps people feel belong, so to speak, so.
Yeah,
Thank you. Yeah, I'd really like to acknowledge the first meeting this year that happened in Arrowtown and the positive community response that we had to that. And it's a little challenging. I get the balance between the cost effectiveness and the access to staff, but it is a little challenging to see, Wanaka sort of get three, Queenstown get the balance where typically equal proportions of population, and Arrowtown is also enabled with a lot more parking and accessibility for people to get. I think that was demonstrated in the turnout we had for the public forum as to how engaged our community got with that venue. So thank you for that consideration. And I suppose just to back up some of the tech comment, I watched the regional deal meetings with ORC and QLDC, and I really liked the way some of their tech actually zoomed in on speakers when they were speaking, so that people could actually be heard. I find it really challenging if I'm ever watching online. I know the same maybe for public to actually be aware of who's speaking, who's saying what. And we've talked about some really easy interventions like names on the back of iPads or something next triennium or name signs, so that our community know who we are and what we're about. So just thank you for the accommodation across all the wards. And putting a flag out there that Arrowtown Kawerau, particularly with all the housing coming at us, is going to be even more populous in the future. So we'd like to put a vote in for more than one a year, please.
One quick comment, I was just really happy to see in there, under paragraph 17, the draft policy proposes members of the public be provided with a link, and also it goes on, it does say that it's in line with current practice, but to provide spaces for people to be able to connect to. I think it's a great thing to keep in there and to try and promote, so that it makes it more accessible. And certainly for, we're all much more experienced with remote access to meetings now, but for someone who's just making a submission or presenting to a panel, there's no reason why that should be done online. It's really simple to do and saves people travelling for, an hour and a half each way to get somewhere. That's good. Thanks.
Well, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? None. Motion carried.
Thanks.
Thank you. 6. Financial delegation limits for the council, from the council to chief executive. By Catherine, taking away now.
I'm perfectly happy to take paper as read, beyond noting that I know there's been some discussion around the borrowing limits, which is why Catherine has joined us at the table to offer some more insight, because that's certainly not my area of expertise.
Questions?
Thank you. Just wondering, how many times would the CEO's delegation limit exceed 50 million?
I'll do that, borrowing.
Sorry again.
Do you want about borrowing?
Yeah.
No. Right, so going forward, the next big one is on 15th of April. There are 6 drawdowns, which total $70 million. And then the next one after that will be a year later on the 15th of April 26, which will be 5 drawdowns, which is totaling 75 million. And then the year after, 6 drawdowns totaling 100 million. So you can see if you literally took every single borrowing amount, bundled them together, they would hit that 100 million. But yeah, if you took them individually, then he would be within his delegation of 30 million.
I think the key is that the amounts are shifting.
Yeah.
As our debt rises,
Yeah.
the timing and the size of swaps in particular, is increasing. So it's really just trying to reflect the, what is, in my view, I think in the view of our financial advisors, what's a practical limit to live with.
And also from my point of view, whatever the limit is, when CE's seen to split them up into smaller packages and do them individually, or does he take them holistically? So there's that perception problem if he's breaking them down just to meet a limit, or whether we just keep an actual limit that's actually grounded in the real world of what he's actually doing, he or she is actually doing.
So the current process now would be, you would need co-signing from yourself.
In some cases, it's a co-signing from me and chair of audit finance and risk.
Yeah, so if you wanted to head over that, let's just say the middle was 50 million, whatever it is, it would be you and that.
So technically, I would come back to council,
and that's what you see on item 3.
But in this instance, when instances just happened, I've gone to the chair of audit finance and risk and the mayor, basically to validate that action.
Sorry. The numbers.
There's a perception by some that this is seen to be a blank check for drawing down borrowing from. Can you just explain whether this sits within the program that we've approved as council, or whether, departures from that, what would happen if there was a departure from that program as opposed to and is this a mechanical mechanism just to manage the program that we've already approved?
Yes, so the latter, it's a mechanical, it's renewal of our borrowing. So it's not new borrowing per se, it's just that rollover, looking for that cheaper interest rate at the moment. We also have a mechanism around the Treasury management policy, which is a diagram that's presented as part of the Bancorp Treasury report, which shows limits of our borrowing. And so we're trying to keep within those policies. We're trying to make sure we've got enough long and enough short to keep within that policy bounds. There's like red lines on those graphs. So that's your mechanism, that's your control.
So is this more like someone has a mortgage with 3 different parts to it and they choosing a fixed rate over a floating rate over something and drawing it down at different times to get the best value?
Correct. Yeah, spreading our risk as well. Rates. Interest rates.
Sure.
Thank you. It's, building a little bit on what, Councillor Smith said on paragraph 10, restating that it's not refinancing or new borrowing, it is refinancing, not new borrowing, and talking around the timely manner to make the best possible borrowing. Can you give us an example as to how this benefits us? I know, we're privy to information through audit risk and finance around how when we are enabled to move quickly, we can actually bring down our cost of borrowing quite substantially. Could you give us an example of how we can reap benefit from this kind of being able to act quickly?
Absolutely. So for the 87 million, that example, We had obviously come to the Audit and Finance and Risk Committee, talked about the swaps and potentially our target that we were trying to achieve, the interest rate target. And we got to that targeted rate, and immediately Bancorp were like on the phone going, right, we can do it today. And we're going, well, we've got to get delegation. So then there was like a 3-day process to get all the paperwork signed. And so we've still got 2 of those swaps that we can't achieve now, that interest rate. So we've got to wait until we can achieve it.
And those interest rates can move within a matter of those 3 days.
It's very volatile at the moment, yes,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Now,
Looking at the attendant A delegations, the amounts, when was the last time that was updated?
So the one around the borrowing was updated in 2018.
Okay, yeah.
And the other stuff was around 2014.
Okay, so quite a while. So most of those are at 25-30% increase, except the 30 to 100, but you've just covered why it needs to go to 100. That actually covers it for the next, what you think for the next 3 years, which it actually groups of things, but you're taking it as a whole. Yeah, okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks. It's just a question around why the 50 went to the AFRC, and so that's the first one. Why did we go with 50 in the first instance?
So Bancorp made a recommendation that 30 million was too low, and that 50 would be a more and taken into account for the future. 50 million would be more suitable. And then I noted that there was these groupings, and to me that didn't seem like a
doesn't comply with the policy.
Well, it didn't seem like a reasonable approach. So so it was like, well, 100 million would cover us, like you say, for three years, to enable whatever choices, because we could choose to bunch those transactions differently. We could group them differently on the next time we renew. Could be choosing different terms, different interest rates. So.
And I guess my other one's just around when making those decisions, because it is volatile in the future, as uncertain, it's probably harder to predict, every time Miles comes to us, things have changed. And there's a reason why you want to have the right limit, but it's also, I think, important to have enough people's eyes over your decision making for those sorts of things when you're doing big chunks of money and swapping and setting limits. And look, I don't know that, we're the experts around this particular council table, but it may be that the next council has some serious expertise in that area. I just wonder, any comments from the sort of trade-off between having governance, stronger governance over that when it gets to a certain limit, because it's a pain to maybe bring it back, but also you've got more people's experience and expertise in the questioning, and and we do have delegation limits for a reason, and things can come back to the full council. So have you thought about the trade-offs there?
I guess coming back to that treasury management policy, that's your control mechanism, and the regular reporting that you're getting from an independent source.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the only thing is that, what's the market going to do is the question, isn't it? And the expertise around picking that.
If you could,
And I can't.
if you could figure that one out, we would be.
No, I'm just,
I would be sitting
I guess
here.
I'm suggesting that, there is a benefit to having stronger governance over things and having a lower delegation and having some things come back to governance, whether at the AFRC or whether here, there's some benefit to that.
And actually, through the chair, I would note that under the delegations to the C, the reporting does include a quarterly report to the C's exercise of delegated powers on material matters to the Audit, Finance and Risk Committee. This probably fits within the package of requirement, and that may provide an opportunity for that committee to comment on delegations that have been exercised.
Yeah, after that.
Yeah, I think one of the key aspects in picking up Councillor Darian's point, none of these swaps are actually generated by myself or Catherine. They are all generated on the advice of Bancorp, who are our professional treasury advisors. So, effectively the delegation is as an executive action of power to do something, but it's actually on the people that we actually rely on every year and for many years to advise us on financing.
I've got a question.
Yep.
Thank you for all the info so far. I guess just coming back to the question around frequency of times where we go over 50 million. I did obviously previously email this question, and we've got 2 times this year, if I'm correct in saying so, 2 times this year where we'll go over 50 million. One is on 15th of the 7th for 87 million for the LGFA short-term debt, and the other time is in April for 70,000.
That LGFA one, because it's short term, there might be another short term the next time, so it might be another 3 months, another 3 months. Just depends on the interest rates.
Right, okay, because I guess where I was going with that is the recommendation from Bancorp AFRC was 50 million, and so it's quite a jump to go to 100 million. Pragmatically, I understand what you're saying. We have our CEO's new employment will be in 26th of February next year, which means we potentially could have a new CEO as well. We'll also have a new council. So I guess for me, it was an opportunity for us to think about, well, if we went with the recommendation of 50 million and put in a clause around approving the signing off of these 2 occasions, then it meets that need without venturing from 30 million, which we currently have, to 100 million. So yeah, just could you just give us your response to, I guess, just to why you don't see that as an option around, because we could have had another option in the report that might have looked like that. It might have looked like, okay, the recommendation was 50 million. So we could go with 50 million and do this.
Yeah, not my diary, but that was just going to be an opportunity that we might miss. That's all.
Oh, okay. So
The thing, sorry, just to answer the question, the thing you have to think about is why is it acceptable to approve something over 50 million now and give the delegation now to the CE and not in 6 months?
I guess it's just because there's more transparency around what's happening, which is useful for everybody else in this organisation.
Yeah,
Yep, like some thinking along similar lines, the AOFC recommendation was for the 50 million. These dates seem to be fairly well known in advance, and we've got meetings every 4 to 6 weeks. Can we not, each time one of these rolls around or it's coming up in within that next period, have a resolution at that point for the next one that's coming along, and then it gives you, does that not give you then the ability that once that resolution's been approved to then jump on the rate that's the right moment within that period of time when it's rolling around at a day?
I suppose the question is what's being achieved by that in terms of efficiency of action.
yeah. And the agility to actually jump on a spot rate that might be benefit to us.
Yes, I mean, it was following the recommendation of the ARC.
With one mover. Sorry.
So I would like to put forward.
Hang on, I've got a mover.
Move the resolution.
Got a seconder. Sorry, got a seconder.
Sorry, thank you.
Sorry, that was Lyle and the seconder was Linda Benton.
Thank you. Is it possible to get the notes on the screen? So all we've got here is anyway it diverts from what's currently there is just printed.
No, hang on, you got it up, so.
Printed in red. Number 4 approved. With maximum limit for the CEO alone to commit the council to borrowing amended to 50 million. And then point 6 is to approve the upcoming one on 15th of April. So that one's already done.
Move it?
Yeah.
Yep. Seconder? Okay, okay. Discussion?
I'm talking on 2 ones.
Yep.
Yeah,
It's
well,
still a substantive motion.
yeah,
Yes.
obviously I moved the other motion. I don't support it. Having sat in the meeting, listened to Bancorp talking, and having the agility to move real quick. We don't know what's going to happen. Like I think the other day, I think we saved $8 million just like that by allowing him to go to swap. Hopefully, he got it within a few days down. And we're talking significant dollar here to the benefit of our community. So I don't see what we achieved by that. It's not as though we're giving him, the CEO, the ability to go and spend $100 million on something, a pet project or something. It's to do with refinancing, and we get the reports here. And the Bank Corp report, quite often the report we get on the agenda changes by the time we get there. That's how things are changing so quickly. And what's happening in America and in China right now, we need that ability to act quickly. And I think that's going to 100 million. If they'd recommended 100 million at the AFC, I think it would have gone through, but it was just a figure they suddenly put up there just to get over the 30 million one. So I don't support the amendment for those reasons.
I back up Councillor Cox, being on the AFRC, there was discussion around the potential to go beyond 50, although it wasn't tabled in that discussion. There was definitely support around being able to be agile and to have this response around the borrowing, but to back up how quickly we see those treasury reports and bank reports move and when they come to the table and the level of savings that we're able to make, and to back up the mayor's earlier comment of just splitting it out when really we need to be able to operate in the real world around the size of expenditure and borrowing that we do have. And my last point on that is this is not talking about new expenditure or borrowing. This is refinancing on what we've got. So it's not like he's going to go out and create another $100 million worth of debt. This is our existing operating levels and going about getting the best deals that we can for our community, for our cost of lending and cost of borrowing. So I can't support that change of amendment. I don't think it gives us enough flexibility.
Thanks. Yes. Oh,
Yeah.
obviously sit on the same committee, and look, my experience is that they generally do come to us ahead of time and signal, and there is a build up. It doesn't just happen on the fly, and certainly not $100 million worth. Remember, if you set the delegation at 50 million, there's still the ability to act at $50 million level. I wouldn't expect that there would be many examples of when you would have to refinance 100 million. So I think and I think also, you know, we're operating in a certain space at the moment where there's a lot of comfort with Miles and Bank Corp, and probably a lot of comfort with, you know, how our staff are operating. That can change really quickly. And I think for that reason, there is a balance to be struck between having sufficient level of oversight and still allowing to move. I mean, don't forget, 50 million is a large amount of money to be able to refinance and to draw down new debt. So keeping that balance in mind, I'm going to support the amendment because I think it's easy enough to work within it, and I think it's easy enough to anticipate when those larger amounts are going to come. You can see them, right? We've seen our borrowing. We know when things need to be switched out. So to stay within our policy. So yeah, I think it strikes a much better balance, and it is what the AFRC recommended. So yes, what the amendment.
Thank you. I don't support the amendment. The reasons for that I actually did used to work in finance, so I do know how it works, and I do know that it works really quickly, and that basically none of us around the table actually have the financial expertise to make a judgment call, and we would be relying on Bank Corp anyway. So am not going to support the amendment, sorry, based on that information.
Okay, just before I go back to the movements, you're going to, look, I agree with Lisa and Lyle, listening into audit finance and risk, and Lyle makes a very good point. We saved the rate part 8 million just in the last swap, and just to achieve that swap, we had to jump through a few hoops. We had to go through myself, we had to go through the audit finance and risk independent chair, and put some guardrails and some transparency in place, and that's why you're retrospectively approving that today. It's a bit of an administrative burden and extended the time period in which we could achieve those swaps. Something could have happened in the market in that time, and we could have missed that opportunity. So, but yes, it's refinancing, it's not raising new debt, and it's also committing to borrowing, which has already been approved through the long-term plan, of which we've all voted on, and then we get a second go through the annual plan as well.
Can you clarify that it's not new debt within the LTP? It is, you can still use that 100 million delegation, still covers new borrowing within what we've signed off on the LTP, correct?
Well, these in particular, there's rollovers. So we have a long list of transactions.
With the debt matures and we're rolling over.
Yeah, we're rolling over.
So where's the delegation around drawing down new debt? Is that not covered by this one?
And
I thought it was.
No, so in the LTP, there will be potential growth in debt.
Yeah. But that's not the
Hang on,
delegation.
But not
we're
part
at
of this.
discussion, so, yeah.
It's not part of this.
This is,
Yeah.
it still covers that, as far as I can tell.
So I'll go to you, Matt, and then.
Yeah, thank you. I'm in two minds after hearing the discussion today as well. So, but I have obviously seconded this amendment. And it's not too late, I guess, in terms of there's another chance to revisit this through the Audit, Finance and Risk Committee. I just would like to get clarification from that committee that they support what we've got on the table here today, as opposed to the recommendation that they to council that they would be happy with the $50 million increase. So that's really all I'm looking for is revisit it through the Audit, Finance and Risk Committee and make sure that that is exactly how they feel about it as well.
Thank you. I just want to point out that this is not based on a lack of trust, and that I do understand this is not based on something where it's thinking that we're just spending money in a willy-nilly way. This is based on good process, and some of the discussion talks to, we're not experts around the table, but we've had expert advice which did actually point to 50 million. So if we're using that argument, we should surely rely on that advice that was given to us. I also want to point out that 50 million is an enabler. I'm not stopping, I'm not proposing we stop anything. We're enabling more. So again, the argument that kind of implied is that we're stopping agility. This doesn't prevent agility, it enables agility. So yeah, it's just not a particularly reinforcing argument to use. Also, I guess when we think about why are we retrospectively approving something? Well, we've got the dates ahead of us. So again, bumping it up to 50 million doesn't prevent our agility. We know what's coming at us. As Gav pointed out, we can choose processes to enable it. So for me, there's absolutely no reason why we actually need to jump to 1 million. We could easily jump to what was recommended by Bancorp and AFRC. So for me, it's quite clear that that would be something that we should take the advice by financial advisors and look ahead to the dates that we have and process those accordingly and deal with them accordingly and use the agility that we have in our back pocket to be able to do that. Because actually, when we look at doing things retrospectively, we saved 8 million, but we could have lost it because it was retrospective. So to me, it's about having that good process in advance. Thank you.
Good. Right, with that, this is just the vote on the amendment, which is the red on the screen there. So all those in favour, which is the one, well, you seconded, mate. 3.
Oh,
which is the red.
The addition says the maximum 50 and then approving the pre-approving the rollover.
All those in favour? 4, you got those? Hands up just for a little bit higher, please.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jane was against. Motion failed. Now we move to the substantive motion.
Could we take this?
I'd say why any benefit in that.
Yeah, doing the retrospective approval, but we don't want to approve the delegation, so I don't want to not approve what you've done. I wouldn't undo it.
Okay, right. take it, so you don't want to. Want to take two, what was it?
1, 2, 3.
1, 2, 3 and 5 and then 4.
No,
1, 2, 3, I suppose. Is that right?
no,
Yeah.
don't you just want to remove 3?
No, just take 1, 2 and 3 together and then 4 and 5 together. Would that not make sense?
Okay, so you don't want to publish them on the website.
Oh, well.
Okay,
You just remove.
discussion,
Right.
any discussion?
Only that as I do view this as reasonably mechanical and that we aren't providing a blank check. I wasn't compelled by any reason that there'd be new information that would restrict me from, from that delegation being exercised under good advice. Anyway, I mean, I can assure you that when I last fixed my interest rate in December, I didn't make a good decision. I suspect that Meg will probably know better than I do. So.
I feel your pain. Bob, you move this, don't want to close it off? Okay.
So,
We'll do 1, 2 and 3. So I'll put 1, 2 and 3 to the vote. All those in favour? No. Against?
No one?
No.
Yes,
I'm
good vote.
confused, sorry, with which bits we're now taking.
Motion
No.
1, 2 and 3, but not approving of the delegation, which is the 100 million.
Yeah.
And 5 sort of is tied in.
2 has gone up to 100 million. Compared to what's written on it.
No, that's a note. That's just noting the AFRC's recommendation. The delegation's 4.
It's interesting that they
That's the
didn't.
key. That's the key one. Okay. 1, 2 and 3. All those in favour? All right.
Oh,
Yes.
Against? None. Passed unanimously. You got that one, Jane?
sorry.
Brilliant. Now I'm going to put 4 and 5. All those in favour? All those against? The 3?
Yeah.
Motion carried. Thank you.
Thank you. We got the
Okay,
Yay, plus.
item 7,
It's so organised.
page 143. Hello, you ready? Go for it.
Thank you. The land review was undertaken and workshops, and the objective was to identify assets that surface requirements. And Marionette Street was identified as one of those properties. So we're here today seeking approval to commence the disposal of 6 Marionette Streets. Any questions?
Got one right next to you and then I'll go to the list.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, we obviously heard from the tenant in public forum. Is there opportunity to, and I won't use the word, to do a preferential sale that's subject to independent valuations and stuff like that? Or are we bound to go through a public open process to get the best value out of the site?
Well, we could guide it by the council. I mean, in terms of first offer, I think that would be highly appropriate, but if we couldn't come to an agreement, then it would move to a public.
Okay, so
I think the advice would be though that to maximise the value of an open competitive process would secure the best value.
That probably gives you your answer.
So, I mean, I'm just conscious that
Two different
Well,
others there. Anyway.
a real estate agent, it introduces new costs and whatever, but I'm just trying to work out, and I agree that we want to get an appropriate value for the land. I'm just sort of trying to understand whether there's any consideration given to the existing tenant in that.
Well, that's in terms of an open process, it wouldn't be that initial view, but if you want to do that, the process is to in order to maximise the value of the sale, we would go to a real estate agent to the process to maximise that value for the council.
And you do And he'd had the opportunity to make an offer like anybody else in that case. Yep.
Thank you. Just asking questions re the community interest in the heritage nature of the site and whether we expose it to any risk through council's sale of it and how it's developed in the future, noting that it's currently residential historic management. Through our sale of it, does it stay residential if it was to sell? Obviously it's protected in the historic zone. The questions from the community is what happens should it sell? And another question from the community is how would council go about selecting an agent to do that?
Well, it's protected within historic zone, and anyone wanting to do something that doesn't comply with that zone would be via the resource consent process, so that would give the council opportunity to decide.
Would it have to stay within children's house?
Sorry, the zone, the area is zoned residential. If council deciding to sell, but the property doesn't change that underlying zoning or the requirements of what you can do on there. If someone who purchases the site wants to do something different, then that'd be subject to the normal resource consenting process. We're not suggesting through this process to limit or restrict what future property owners might have or use that site for, subject to the underlying zone. And in terms of the selection of the real estate agent, we'll do a normal process. I'm assuming go out and seek offers from agents and try and pick the best one.
So competitive process, just taking on board councillors' most questions about tenure. Thank you.
I don't think it's said anywhere in the report, I'm sorry if I missed it, but the person that came spoke to us to talk about what the funds would be used for. What is that ring fence to Arrowtown, or what, how was it bought? I know sometimes things are.
The comment in the paper was, yeah, under the long-term plan, revenue from asset sales we used to repay debt, fund the purchase of new assets. So it's not specifically saying.
Can you repeat that? Sorry, I couldn't hear it.
Yeah. So as part of the long-term plan, it says revenue from asset sales we used to repay debt or fund the purchase of new assets.
But beyond the report.
The report doesn't deal with what the ultimate use of that funds would be, other than to know council standard approaches to pay down debt through its normal approach.
Oh, okay, so I think maybe my question was that, was it linked, you know how common sale is linked to something?
The Arrowtown Endowment Fund was the suggestion.
Yeah, is this linked to anything, or it's just
So
a
we-
freehold property, or?
We would need to go,
Okay.
and whatever sale happened would be applied against the relevant fund, whether it comes to general funds or whether it returns to the Arrowtown Endowment Fund. So we would just apply whatever policy setting relates to that.
Okay, so there will be something somewhere that says.
There will be,
Okay.
if it's still relevant.
Yeah.
Then you should.
In the meantime, it's offset against debt, and then if it's supposed to be applied to infrastructure in Arrowtown, it could be, yeah.
That's right. I mean, there's plenty of infrastructure going into Arrowtown and everywhere to suck up those.
Thank you.
I had a question and it's got, can you come back to me?
Yes, next.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Yeah, just a quick question in terms of, have the external Arrowtown stakeholders been consulted at all on it or advised that it's for sale?
I can maybe speak to that. If that's okay. I've spoken with the Arrowtown Plan Advisory Group, the Arrowtown Village Association and the Arrowtown Business Promotion and Business Association to get their feedback on it. The Arrowtown Plan Advisory Group felt that it is kind of the ugly duckling in the historic miners' quarter, and therefore they wouldn't have a position on its sale, and the hope that perhaps a better outcome for historic consideration might come out of it. And the same with the AVA and APBA. They, of course, took on board the current tenants' viewpoints and the nature of the area prior, quite an artistic habitat, if you call it that, of creatives and artists. Excuse me, over time there has been some shift in surrounding usage where there were other operative creatives in the area, and there's been some more shift towards food and beverage and exhibition and gallery space. But the main focus on the community was around understanding that if it did come up for sale and something in the future was done on that site, would the historic guidelines apply to whatever outcome may be delivered in the future?
Is that the answer you would have given?
Probably wouldn't have used ugly duckling.
There's a beautiful swan waiting to emerge.
Yes.
Right. And just a second question, we obviously heard from a public speaker today, there was the tenant, the current tenant. Can you just confirm how long that tenant has been in that household? 15 years. So that is true, right?
Yeah.
Just good to know. I was just sort of, I wanted to report, so I guess if it's this, there is an impact to the current tenant, and it's been a fairly long tenancy, so I think that's something we need to also think about. Thank you.
Nikki, good.
Yeah, just question on the financials, in terms of, because obviously we receive rental income at the moment. And if we sell it, we can pay down debt and we won't have to do maintenance and we'll have a positive impact on our interest payments. Has all that been quantified? Like, do we understand the OPEX, the difference?
In terms of saving on maintenance?
In terms of saving on maintenance and saving on interest costs, so whatever we sell it for, we're anticipating a certain quantum. You know, if we pay that down, what's the interest that we don't have to pay because we've paid down that debt, and versus what we're getting in income from rental?
No, not down to those specific items. So, gee, finance would probably be in a better position to answer that for me, but
it would just be good to know, like, if we're making an argument that we're you know, that it's a financial decision, it would be good to understand not just that we will be raising some capital, you know, but that what is the operational impact?
So I do think we need to come back to what the purpose of this is. I mean, council has asked staff in the past to come back and identify what is surplus profits into council's operational needs. This has come up a number of times. This is surplus property, notwithstanding the fact that it's tenanted. Its long-term purpose was never required to be a tenancy. It was a property that was hoovered up as part of the creation of the heritage area. So I think effectively we're delving into questions which actually are not simple.
No, that's not fair.
No, sorry.
A question as
No, sorry, hang on. Sorry.
That's not okay.
No, can you please let me finish, councillor? To be fair, I wasn't commenting on your comments or your questions at all.
So
I said that.
I want to understand.
Sorry, can you please wait and let me finish my question, my answer?
Wow.
No, I'm.
Hang on, just hit the pyramid, just deep breath. Brilliant. Let the CE finish, please, councillor.
So what I was trying to remind councillors is that we're getting very much into the detail of who's there, why they're there, whether that's fair. What we've been asked to do is come back and recommend on the relinquishment of individual properties that are not needed for council's purposes, and the level at which we've addressed this report for sale is at that level, not specifically going down into the individual circumstances of individual people.
Right.
Is there a question?
So you can't tell me, just to clarify, we don't understand, because we've been asked to look at, you know, what property is there for disposal. But to me, we should be understanding when each property comes up, with the costs and benefits of that sale. I've just been told that doesn't matter because we've been asked to look at property for sale. But looking at this one in particular, I just want to understand what is the financial balance here? Yes, we'll get some money back, but there is a rental on it, it's not their land.
So, as I think the chief identified, this was identified as surplus land for sale because it's not needed. We have not done a financial analysis about the benefits of paying down debt versus rental, nor have we done an assessment of the work that would need to be done to bring that building up to standard or future approach. We're treated as a property owner of a building which is, I prefer the ugly swan. We have also done how much would cost the council to bring that building up to a reasonable level. We haven't done all those because it was identified as surplus property. That's what this report deals with. If you can't make that decision and you want to get that, then I suppose you can pass a resolution asking for that, but this is the nature of the report right now.
Thank you. Any further questions, councillors? Right, do I have a move up? Thank you, Barry. I'll second. Discussion. Well, no discussion. I'll put it to vote. All those in favour? Aye. All those against?
No.
One. Motion carried. Thank you. The report, item 8, page 150.
So thank you, Your Worship. So you'll have the report. So relatively simple report this month. So agreeing the delegation to adjust the water supply, so adjust the adjustment policy there. The recommendations from the Wanaka Community Board regarding the location of an air quality monitoring site, a licence for Connecture to be in Forest Heights, again considered and recommended to you by the Wanaka Upper Clifford Community Board, and then the recommendation for the adoption of the risk management policy from the Board of Finance and Risk.
Questions?
Mike, what the Connexa one, how come this is coming to us as a report but other ones don't?
This one, because of the way that the delegations are structured for the Wanaka Upper Clifford Community Board, so they consider those types of leases in the Wanaka Upper Clifford area, and then they come through to council in the Wakatipu and the Arrowtown Kara awards. Those are made under delegation by staff, myself.
Can I just say the reason why I asked that? Because I think there's one going in Lake Hayes Estate that I did try and argue was not the best place, but it didn't.
There is a difference between road reserve
and reserve.
Oh,
yeah,
okay,
the other
yeah, all right, okay.
So
yeah,
we have the same problem, is that we
Okay.
don't, there are some that we don't like as such that are in road reserves and vice
We just
versa.
don't have a choice.
So
I
they-
mean, that's where I came to with my argument with them when I tried, but anyway, just
Sorry,
wanted
yeah.
to understand.
And that's because they have a power and utility requirement authority. What's the, I forget the exact term, network utility authority to do that.
So a quick question on the water supply scheme boundary adjustment. So the only change there really is the job title of the council staff.
That's correct. Yeah, that's reflecting our current structure.
Okay, and then just on the risk tree lines now. We've had workshops, or at least one workshop on this before, and I've been mulling it over, and I looked at the original Institute of Internal Auditors model that it's come from, and it does say that our model has been based on that, but I'm just, in my mind, our model's got to become a whole lot more complicated than the original base IAA model. It's got more boxes and more arrows than the original one, which was very simple. And probably is, simple is often, so, I mean, the question that I've had, and I had it at the workshop as well, after some of the questioning there, but is that we've added in this, the chief executive box above in the third line, which it's very clear in the IAA model that that is not there, and they explain why it isn't there. It's one of the principles of the model that third line internal assurance or internal audit process has that direct line, and it does have a direct line on our model as well, but that it doesn't have a reporting function to the chief executive. We do show, on there one does show a cross communication line to the chief executive, but not a reporting line, which ours does. And I just think that the more basic model from the IAA, which doesn't have that reporting line, has the communication line, is a better representation of what it's trying to achieve. Is there any ability for us today to modify this? The other aspect that I would like, having reflected on for quite a long time as well, is that we've got separate lines for audit, finance and risk and council sitting above the second and third lines. Is there any reason why they can't just be in the same box together and both be reported to? I mean, I know the audit, finance and risk committee is a subcommittee of full council, and we certainly have the ability to read all the audit, finance and risk committee reports, but the whole basis of there being a committee is that not everyone needs to read all the reports from all the committees. But if there's anything that comes from that internal audit function on the third line that is deemed to be relevant to the council, that it goes directly to the council if it needs to be, rather than having to go through the audit, finance and risk committee, it can go to both.
So Gareth may be able to comment on the evolution of the three lines model, which has been discussed on a number of occasions, including with the committee in terms of reporting to council and the ARC committee. I suppose effectively, the model that we operate under, as with every other committee, is that you report the right matters to the right committee. You don't have dual lines of reporting. And obviously, any member of council can attend the audit, finance and risk committee. Those papers are available to councillors. So that is a function of the audit, finance and risk committee. That's its delegated terms of reference. We don't necessarily do that for other committees where we have dual lines of reporting. So, but Gareth maybe will probably be in a better position to talk to the actual model and how that has evolved.
Through you now, I'm happy to provide some context. So I suppose the first thing to say is that we've not had a formal model until very recently. This is the first time we've considered such a model for our risk management policy. We obviously have had ad hoc internal audit previously. A number of our functions have had audits for several years, but we haven't had a central audit function that's relatively new to us. Our processes at this point in time is that the chief executive reviews the internal audit program, which is defined by our internal assurance lead based on our risk register. So we look at our risk register, identify where our significant risks are, and make a determination of what we're recommending through to the chief executive. I think the question that was raised was one that was raised at the workshop in terms of who approves the internal audit program, which is what the line shows there in terms of the chief executive directing functions of that role. We discussed that again at the Audit, Finance and Risk Committee, and we made a commitment to review the model as we review our terms of reference. We need to consider both. As you rightly point out, obviously there's a connection between the formal role of the Audit, Finance and Risk Committee and this new function that isn't currently recognised in the terms of reference because it's a new function to council. Complicated answer, but in summary, we're recommending that we review that with a review of our terms of references, and we have committed to the Audit, Finance and Risk Committee that would include the Audit, Finance and Risk Committee approving the internal audit program.
So, I mean, I guess what concerns me is that chief executive, not you in particular, but the role appears in there twice. And I know what you're saying about chief executive sets the program for the internal audit. should that then be that there's only an arrow going in one, if it's going to be there at all, in the third line column, should there only be an arrow going from the chief executive to the third line and not one going from the third line to the chief executive? So that they're not reporting what they're doing, because that's what that signifies to me. Is that it says accountability and reporting. Whereas that third line, the internal audit, internal assurance function, should only be reporting in this case, to the Audit, Finance and Risk Committee, or as I'm suggesting also, or to the council.
Again, Mayor, through you, happy to respond to that. So yes, those reporting lines and accountability and responsibility will be reviewed with the terms of reference. So the intent, and this is what we talked about at the committee, is that the internal assurance lead will report to the chief executive. That's standard practice. Chief executive will be able to comment in terms of the findings of the internal audit, but then that audit will be presented to the Audit, Finance and Risk Committee. Irrespective of the lines on the 3 lines diagram in front of you, that for all intents and purposes happens at the moment in any case. The only difference is the Audit, Finance and Risk Committee note rather than requesting them approve the audit findings.
And the other thing to draw attention to as well is we do have that external audit as well, which is another check.
Yeah.
And they use that internal audit information.
But again, that's also represented in the base IIA model. Like I say, that model doesn't have this reporting to management as such. It goes straight.
But it makes a note that it can.
I didn't see that. It
It's
also.
in an S just at the bottom of like the 4th or 3rd page that says the chief auditing executive for administrative purposes can talk to report, it's something like report, like you've got it up there obviously, report to the administrative person. It's in there,
They're very clear in that document from the Internal Audit Institution that, and I think it's principle 5 is that there's this direct line straight to the governance body. It's there as well. Yeah, it is there as well. This one's also got this other little step in the middle of that as well.
But it's separate to it, and it's in line with what that document says.
I'm just not convinced that it's achieving what the original model.
Hang on, it's but there's nothing out of step what's in that document.
So we're being asked to adopt this. But I'm saying I don't really agree with the way some of the representation is.
Well, we'll talk about in discussion. You have any further questions?
I mean, you were asked about this, as you said, at the AFRC meeting. Well, I wasn't there obviously, but did you have anything more to add on what was discussed there and what your responses were?
I think one of the important things, sorry, through you, one of the important things to consider is that the audit program needs to be responsive to changes in risk profile. There's 2 core components of the audit program. One of those is the more structured audits that I described in terms of looking at risks on the risk register. The other is what the activities that our internal assurance lead does in the fraud control plan space. So that's an ongoing identification of potential red flags. What we do at the moment is if we identify something in our process that needs to be flagged to the chief executive and we request approval to do some further work, we can do that relatively quickly. And that's one of the reasons why we originally recommended that the program was approved by the chief executive. We did talk about that at the Audit, Finance and Risk Committee. It's not insurmountable to manage that through a change in process, and we've obviously recommended that we do make that change through a review of the terms of reference to make sure that it's clear around the roles and responsibilities in the space for the committee.
So when you say, review it, then is there an intention that this will be reviewed on a regular basis? And what sort of frequency?
And so the policy determines a 2-year review. So our standard policy is a 3 year. There's a reason for that. We think it's intentional that we review it more frequently. But we have at the committee said that we would review the terms of reference with this point specifically in mind for the next training.
So if it was adopted today, then the next review would be in 2 years.
No, if it was adopted today, the next review would be relatively soon and likely to be in front of council in around December.
Right, so after this current coming election.
Yes.
So yes, and it's a review of this policy as well as the delegations for an audit, finance and risk committee you mentioned before will be also reviewed obviously by the council.
That's it.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I suppose the difficulty I have is I don't really know what the recommendation from the Audit Risk and Finance Committee is and what they really talked about or considered or even were involved in informing this. I mean, I think this sort of thing sits really strongly with Audit Risk and Finance, and it would have been useful to have more. Are you able to inform me or any one of the committee members as to what particularly the independent Audit Risk and Finance Committee members thought about this policy and what feedback they provided and what the actual recommendation to us is from them?
To adopt it, I can tell you.
Yeah, they don't recommend it. They provided it.
Like to hear.
Oh, the independent guy who seemed to be the Moron, Bill Moron. Yeah,
Yeah, be careful here, we can't speak for
okay.
the person
Well,
that's not here.
I don't feel me to answer there from my point of view. You might have a different view, but it was discussed in detail. That's why we're having the review to review the delegation that because the suggestion was, no, the proposal was that it shouldn't be the chief executive approving the internal audit thing. So that's the idea, to change the delegations and review that after the training.
So has that point been changed in the policy though? If that was the view of the committee, that structure was needed adjustment, but it hasn't been adjusted. Is that what I?
No, it's going to be done after the new training and the review. Yeah, after that.
Did they direct that?
So the current terms of reference don't allow the chief executive at the moment to approve. So we'd have to change the terms of reference to change that model.
But the committee was, well, might be the committee was comfortable on the day at the assurance that we would review this early in the new term, and that would be one of the matters that we would pick up.
And there were other matters as well. So one of the other matters raised was what? Yeah.
Okay, so, but you said it's a 2-year review though, so is that's not early in the term, that's mid next term. At best. Because there's not much left of this term.
We're currently starting to review terms of reference for the next training.
In the terms of reference.
Yes.
So the policy doesn't get reviewed, the terms of reference get reviewed.
And then
that informs where the delegation sits, the authority sits, and then you review the policy. Is that how I read it?
Yeah. And that's going to be done, not waiting 2 years to do it. As soon as the terms of reference are done, the review
It's
of the
going to
policy
be
will
commenced at the beginning of the next.
Just the second meeting of a new training and then.
Audit Risk and Finance Committee indicated that we wanted to see that happen in unison, that on the terms of reference were reviewed, that we ensured that the policy aligned with that review.
So I've just got one other question. Are we better off leaving this on the table or something, and I don't know what the right mechanism is, and getting the policy where the Audit Risk and Finance Committee wants it before we approve it? Or
But the Audit Risk and Finance Committee, based on all discussion, the committee
still
by the
subject
staff
to that.
approved it by a majority decision. Here it's in front of you now for adoption.
Okay. All right, thank you.
So yeah, if you want to do away with the audit back in, well, I guess nothing.
Yeah. Further questions?
Yeah. Thank you. So I'm just interested, it goes to what Gavin's sort of saying about the chief executive being right in there in our model over in between the governance and the third line, whereas in the IIA's model, it's the management's off to the side, in line with its principle that it is independent. What role did management have in deciding this policy and how the third line operates?
Happy to respond to that, in there. So the policy in this structure was defined by my team. So I suppose in response to management, I'm a manager because I manage that team. working with the internal assurance lead, Mariana, who I know councillor you're familiar with.
Yeah.
I suppose the difference between the Institute of Internal Auditors and a local government environment also needs to be considered. So we're taking a model that doesn't envisage a local government environment and envisages a standard business in a corporate commercial setting. And obviously we need to ensure that this model is fit for purpose. My view, as I said earlier, is we need to balance the ability to change the programme relatively quickly in response to a fairly dynamic environment and governance and oversight. At the moment, this model that we have in front of us on the page is what is happening already, yet the model isn't recognised in a risk management policy. There's no reference to a three-line model in any of our policies. So for me, it's important that we do recognise the model and we seek an opportunity through the terms of reference to review that model to make it fit for purpose.
Do you, just agreeing with a couple of things, I'm just interested in your thoughts. Do you agree that one of the core principles, I think there's 6 of them, of the 3-line is that it's independent from management?
Again, through you, Matt, yes.
Okay, great. And what was the other one? Sorry. Sorry. And do you agree that the IAA model requires a strong connection between governance and internal audit?
Again, through you, Mayor, yes, there's an important role there.
Thanks. And I do have another question on a different topic, if it's appropriate to ask now, which is the boundary adjustment policy. Look, if we don't agree this, then will future applications to have extensions to the water, wastewater and water network boundary, will they have to be agreed by full council?
No, that was just basically in the absence of that, and I don't exactly know that it will either default to me because it'll be a sub-delegation of mine. So it'll default to me being the delegatee or possibly even Tony.
Yep.
It's not a direct delegation from council.
Right, that's great. So you would make the decisions about whether we can hook more people up to our wastewater network?
Yeah.
I guess, if we don't agree. Thank you.
Thank you. I asked some questions in audit risk and finance, read the 3 lines model that I just want to put here to give some understanding of full council. And it was around my questions around what the 3rd line reflects as independence, because there's been some question as to whether it's independent enough. And my questions at AFRC were, does the fact that the Audit, Finance and Risk Committee have independent members and chairs to it, and the very fact that each of us on that committee are elected by our communities as independent voices to the organisation, is that relevant in keeping that independence in that 3rd line?
Again, through you, Mayor, happy to respond to that. So as we said at the committee, the fact that our Audit, Finance and Risk Committee is set up with independence is for the very purpose of ensuring we have independence on the committee. Even before we had a proposed 3-line, the defence model, that's good practice. My view is obviously that provides independence, as does the code of ethics that myself are required to adhere to, as our internal assurance lead is required to adhere to. And our reports are already presented to the Audit, Finance and Risk Committee. So they're presented and they're not changed by management. They're presented to the Chief Executive. Managers are able to comment and provide feedback. Obviously, if we've made an error, then that's corrected, but we don't change our recommendations, which also provides that independence function.
Thank you. And yes, so my questions helped clarify that the 1st line was all around our operational controls. Our 2nd line was around our risk, compliance and regulatory pieces of it, and therefore those directional arrows between the ELT and things there. And then that 3rd line being so responsive to the independent piece, My questions were around all of those other feed-ins that give us that independence as far as other external audits and qualifying statements and measures, all feed into that. Which arrow kind of demonstrates the pieces that are also independent, but perhaps not reflected here? Say, for example, our annual audits of our annual plans and things like that. Where do they feature in our diagram?
Happy to respond to that, Mayor. So, as I said earlier, we have a number of internal audits that are undertaken that happen outside of my team. We get externals that we engage, and that's because they have specific area of expertise that we don't have in my team. So, an example of that would be building consent. We have the building consent process in that. That's an independent process, so although it's done by externals, it follows a similar process that I've described. So there's a number of
that orange bar on the right and the red bar that's representative of those other independent controls that we have to respond to.
It's still part of a third line function. So the orange and red bars are organisations that we don't define the scope of the audit. Their scope is defined by another party, whether that's Audit New Zealand or whoever else makes that decision. So when I'm talking about internal audit, I'm talking about things that us as an organisation by governance have defined the scope of that audit. Those other bars are for externals making that decision for us.
So they could in fact come a little bit higher up council as well than it was stop at AFRC level.
Through you, Matt. Good point. Yes. Yeah, I accept that.
Thank you.
Further questions? None. Right. Do I have a mover? Thank you, Lyle. Thank you, Lisa. Discussion?
Amendment, please. I'd like to propose an amendment. I think it's able to be put up on the screen. No, I can read it. That would help. Thanks, Noel.
Point of order, Mr. Chair, this,
Oh, we need a second.
What have you done from?
yeah, this you're putting up a motion with respect, Nikki, under a standing order 25.2. This motion seems very similar to what you've already put up in our council committee and Bruce committee, and in that standing order, you can't put up a motion again if it's failed already in the council committee, my understanding.
I thought it was the same committee.
No, I think it's, I'm not sure, but my understanding of standing orders is under a council committee, so you can't keep putting up the same motion in different council committees if it's already failed. That's my understanding of 25.2, but anyway, sorry, with respect, just wanted to check that out.
22.5. 22.5.
Sorry, I meant 22.
There is also other consideration.
Sorry, what?
The other consideration is standing on a 6.5, whether this is considered looking to amend a decision made under delegated authority of the previous committee.
I'm not amending anything.
Question.
Hang on.
The recommendation from the committee was to take it as it is.
Well, this is to take it as it is, but to review it as per the commitment of the council.
So, Lyle, that is, in your view,
Well, it's a resolution, the motion.
A similar
is very similar
motion.
to what we had at the Audit Finance and Risk Committee.
lost.
And my understanding from my understanding, I might be wrong, I just,
Reasons
my understanding
Yeah,
orders
reasons
is
for
that
that.
you only can do it, have one go at it.
Similar to a lost amendment. Lisa?
It's a different committee.
So it is similar to, I don't think the amendment got a seconder in the AFRC, so it failed.
Yep, so it lost. Yep.
But I agree with councillor Cox with respect Nikki, that it is really similar to an amendment that didn't get passed at the
An
committee.
amendment, which is exactly what the staff have committed to doing. And which, I'm honestly, it's a completely different committee. This is the full council.
We go to committee decision. Motion of 22, similar to a loss of.
Yeah, but the key. So you've got.
That one.
Yeah, the committee decision if made of that, so the committee considered the matter failed because they one of the seconds, so this would be repeating an exercise of a decision effectively that the committee had made.
So under 22.5D would negate a committee decision if made under delegated authority. Proposed proposed amendments cannot be similar to an amendment that has already been lost, and it would also negate a committee decision if made.
But it wasn't lost because it wasn't put. I mean, it didn't
No, you
pass, so there was no decision on it.
No, you lost because you didn't get a seconder. Okay, so moving on. I won't accept that amendment.
Right.
Discussion?
Sorry, we're discussing the original.
Original motion now, yes.
Yep, happy to discuss. So what I was proposing in the amendment was, and I'm not speaking to, I'm just saying what I was proposing was just to set in place what the staff had offered to do and what the committee had agreed to, and it was merely formalising it. It was not what I think we should do. And so therefore I will be voting this down because the model that we've got in front of us is so far different to the base model of the IAA, which is really clear that we need to have independence between, there's no point in having an internal audit function unless it's independent from management. The whole point, as it states in its document, is that it be the eyes and ears of the council and that it is independent. This one's not. And I think, look, we need to be really careful about this. I'm just going to read out from something that's in here, possibly say it. So this is straight from the IAA's document on the model. Internal audit is accountable to and sometimes described as being the eyes and ears of the governing body. The governing body, which is responsible for oversight of internal audit, requires ensuring an independent internal audit function is established, including the hiring and firing, which we can't do, but we can achieve this in other ways, including the hiring and firing of the chief audit executive, which I believe is Mariano in our case, serving as the primary reporting line for that person, so that's to us, or to whoever we delegate that to, approving the resourcing of the audit plan. So governance is supposed to approve the resourcing of the audit plan. They're supposed to receive and consider the reports, and they're also supposed to enable free access by that auditor to the governing body, so that there's a direct line, so that there is no chance of, the model has to have independence, so that there's no chance of management interfering with something that those internal auditors believe needs to get up to the governing body. And at the moment, the model that we've got in place just doesn't achieve the purpose because it's put management, the chief executive, right in there doing all the directing, all the resourcing, all the escalating. It is so far from the IIA model that it just, to me, it can't be approved. I was willing to accept that maybe we just formalise this review of it and sort of direct that we look to improve that independence and improve that connection to the full council. But given that that's not in writing and given that we may have a whole new council come September, I don't think we're setting them up well. So I think we need to not approve this today and we need to come back and we need to review the terms of reference, or actually to review this and then review the terms of reference to management policy. Yeah, it's really disappointing. And look, these points that I'm raising, they're not just mine. At the last committee meeting, I raised the resourcing issue and said, look, why are we not, through the long-term plan, providing a set amount of budget and making sure that that line is resourced well. And Bill Moran, I can quite happily say, piped up and said, good question, that's standard practice. So there were a couple of things that needed to change. And I think there's more. I think we need direct access to Mariano so that we can relay our concerns and he can relay any directly to us. Because otherwise, management gets in the middle, as it has in this meeting, you know, and our questions get shut down. So look, for those reasons, I'm going to be voting it down. Look, and also I'm going to be voting it down because I think we actually need some more oversight at this point on that water boundary adjustment. I think that should sit higher with our direct employees so that given the issues that we've got with the discharge field, we've got a little bit more control. Thanks.
Discussion? Lisa?
Yeah, I'd just like to reiterate the areas of independence that we do have and that we do see, and that there are so many other criteria that come into that third line of operating, and that the arrows do go all the way to full council at the top of the chart. And Audit, Finance and Risk Committee are tasked with making those reports to full council. I acknowledge that those terms of reference are being reviewed for the new council, and that we have had assurance that the policy will be looked at in that piece as well. I'm in support of the third line model, and I think some of our discussion at AFRC, I think it was 2019, was it? Yes, we had nothing. 2018, 2019, and how far the organisation's come as far as our first line of defence with regular and consistent identification of our risks, also our second line, and just the accountability and reporting and alignment that we're seeing right across the model in the organisation and how far this has come. But yeah, I think we do have independence in that third line, and I've been assured of the sirens, excuse me, been assured by the independence and the expertise that we've had, not just within the organisation, but also the time that committee members have taken to go away and learn about the three lines model and test it out in lengthy debate and discussion through AFRC. And it does frustrate me that it keeps coming back to relitigating things that have been discussed and agreed by other committees, and then it comes up in a different forum with the same argument. But that's my personal frustration on that one. So I do support this today, and thank you, Gareth, and to your team, and to Mariano for the work that's been done today. Thank you.
I'll go to Gavin, and I'll go to you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it would have hurt to have had a part of the resolution that did ensure that this review happened. I mean, I know you've said that it will happen, but you know, it seems from experience that when things are included in the resolution, they definitely will happen. Whereas, you know, who knows what might happen in the meantime, that things might change. But yeah, so it's not like I say, I don't think it would have hurt to have had that. I mean, it's been put and hasn't been lost, so it's a lost opportunity, I think. As I've said before, I just think that we certainly could tweak this a little bit and maybe change the way it looks slightly. And you know, you have undertaken to say that that will be reviewed at a point in the future. So if I do support this, it'll be on that basis of what you've undertaken to do. You know, after the next election, and with whoever is sitting around the table at the time, whoever that might be.
Thank you. Thank you for all your work. I know it has come a long way. I think what you have referenced today is the model doesn't achieve the purpose it's set out to until terms of reference of the AFRC kind of incorporate that. And I think back to the first time that you showed us the three lines model, which I can't remember how long ago it was, but probably about a year ago maybe or more. And yeah, more, but you know, in that very first meeting, I referenced the IAA's model, and we had this exact discussion then, and we talked about direction of the arrows and what that means. So, you know, whilst we get caught up on the actual diagram, it is really important. I totally agree. I just think it could have just been more solid if we'd have just included it in the resolution. I feel that
Quentin's point that you made earlier, just, you know, could we just table this and just kind of get it right, get it in the right order? Is kind of where I'm sitting. I feel like it's all, everything's moving in the right direction, but we just could have done it a bit better. So at the moment, the cart is leading the horse, and we haven't got it in writing that that's actually happening, but it is the intention. So I know I don't feel comfortable with adopting it for that reason, but yeah.
Okay, I'll just point out. If we refer to the paragraph that Councillor Gledding spoke to in the IAA, she actually omitted the footnote that states, for administrative purposes, the CAE, which in this case is the internal assurance lead, may also report to an appropriate senior level of management. Our model shows exactly
I don't
that.
hear about the reporting. Reporting's fine.
Hang on, you've had your turn. So that our model, right before us, this one here that everyone's talking about with arrows and little blobs, is showing exactly that. What would be of concern is if there was an arrow between the chief executive and audit, finance and risk. That's when the independence is broken. You don't see that right now, because you've got the reporting to the chief executive, and that's why it's there, because it's actually allowable under the model, as everyone refers to, as the IAA model. It is completely acceptable and is even shown and written in the document. So I'm in support of it. We had nothing 2 years ago when it came to assurance. This is an evolution from where we were, and we'll keep evolving as time goes on and this practice comes into play. So with that, I'll go to you, Bob, if you've got anything further to say.
Oh, yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. Well, I would reiterate the fact that it has come a long way. Gareth, in the last meeting, you're just having that report from the internal auditor, Mariana. You could see the independence was already showing there. They were going back to management, the comments from management. He responded to those. So what we got was the most reasonably independent internal. Then you get the external influence coming through when you get the other expertise and to cover areas like building consents and that. This is up and running now. We've done a lot of work, and both even the Audit Finance Risk Committee has got a bit of work to do just to get up to speed and understanding how to get the best value out of this, and also how to best report through to council. Yes, you can have a line straight to council, but then you may as well have the committee in the middle. That's what the committee is there for. So I think we're on the right track, and I do trust the fact that Gareth and the team will be putting this up for review after the terms of reference are done, reviewed and the new training. So I'm pretty confident that we're on the right track. So I support it as I moved it. Thank you.
With that, put it to the vote. All those
Please
in
split,
favour?
please. We've got lots of different ones in there. Haven't we?
I appreciate it being split.
Which ones?
Well, for me, 7.
1 to 6.
So it's 7, and I don't want to approve the delegation for the water supply boundary, which is 2.
For the vote, 1, 3, 4, 5 and 6. All those in favour? Aye. All those against? None. Motion carried. I'll put number 2. All those in favour? Aye. All those against? Each voted against. Motion carried. And number 7. All those in favour?
Aye.
Okay, against, 2, motion carried. Thank you, team. I move that we move into public excluded. Seconder. Thanks, Kevin.